Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from in the world. I'm guessing that it's good afternoon for most people, but we know that we're going to be welcoming lots of people from different time zones today on Loyalty Day. Yeah, of course, Loyalty Day 2022, Roger. I should have a bit of paper I can pass to you from screen to screen.
Yeah. We'd be going the wrong way, but yeah, it's exciting.
It's very exciting indeed. Our sixth, yes, sixth Loyalty Day, and delighted to welcome so many people to our annual celebration of supporter loyalty. So what have we got in store today on Loyalty Day, our sixth Loyalty Day, 17th of November? Well, we're going to open with a keynote talk from our very own Roger Lawson. Big applause. Well, I won't steal any of his thunder, but it will be it'll set the scene for the day. Then we've got Vanessa from Australian Red Cross, Vanessa Byrne, Viktoria Rowe from Compassion International. Then we have Jason and Rachel, that's Jason Novelli and Rachel Honeybun. Jason from Heart and Stroke Foundation Canada, Rachel Honeybun from Blakely Fundraising, an agency they're working with in Canada. Followed swiftly by Barbara Levkov and Laura Sanchez, both from SOS Children's Villages. Laura's from Colombia, and Barbara represents the region, who's actually based in Argentina. And our last speaker is Jo Dunsford from Animals Asia. And so loads of really brilliant content. Each of those presentations will last around 20 minutes. And after each one, we'll have some time for questions, discussions, and sort of any relevant themes that are emerging. And Roger's got a few special bits and pieces that will be sprinkling, a bit of magic dust, the magic loyalty dust that Roger will be sprinkling between the sessions as well. Some like perspectives from us. And so just very quickly, before we hand over to Roger, about loyalty, just very quickly about us, and it is, I promise you very quickly, about loyalty is Roger and myself, so Roger Lawson and Richard Spencer, and there we are. And we've been working together for a number of years, working out how to help charities grow supporter loyalty. Big news, it's not going to be just us two in the new year. We're out now looking for somebody else to join our team. So if you know of anybody who's keen to join our team, or if you're interested yourself, pop over to the website. We've got full details on there. So that's yeah, should be brilliant. Anyway, so that's a quick one from us. But about loyalty isn't just Roger, me, and whoever else would like to join us. About loyalty is actually all of these charities who we're working with, or who we have worked with. So each of these charities is probably between, 5 and 10 people who we work quite closely with, represents a very large number of people who we're working with constantly to help them grow loyalty. It's a growing community. It's lots of people working together, helping each other. In fact, this morning, we had a fantastic workshop with some of our members, talking about how we turn some of our loyalty insights into action plans and grow loyalty and grow income. It was a really brilliant discussion and engagement, and loads of hints and tips that came from it. So it's what we're about. Yes, we do measurement and analysis and data and stuff, but we're also about very much a community, helping kind of shift and grow loyalty, which I think is a good moment now to hand over to Roger. Because Roger is going to talk about why loyalty and why Loyalty Day.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. Just checking that that's working. The right slide is up. You can see it. Excellent. Great. Thank you, Richard. And thank you, everyone, for coming along today as well, and giving up some hours of your time, which I hope is going to be really valuable for you. We are today's as Richard said, our sixth annual Loyalty Day, and it's I have to say it's one of my favourite days of the year because it's an opportunity for us to talk, and particularly for other people to talk about something that we just feel really strongly about, that's really important for us, for our charities, for our donors, and in fact for the whole sector. So I'm delighted you're here, and I'm just going to kick off the session today, or today's Loyalty Day, by answering really sort of two questions. The first one, why loyalty? Why do we talk about loyalty so much? And then secondly, why do we have Loyalty Day? Why do we put this in the calendar every year? So let's start by thinking firstly, answering that first question, why loyalty? And I think to answer that, we need to understand what we mean when we use the word loyalty. And when we talk about loyalty, Richard and myself, I want to sort of make this clear at the outset. We talk about the emotional connection that supporters have with us, the way people feel about us, and the feeling of support, connection, allegiance that they have towards us, to our work, to our cause, to our brands, to our organisations, our charities. Because it's that emotional connection that makes them want to support and want to keep on supporting long into the future. And it's that emotional loyalty that creates that long-term support. We all talk about growing supporter loyalty, and we often will mean different things by it. But I think for us, we just sort of want to make this point at the start. It's not, when we talk about loyalty, we're not talking about the number of times people give or retention rates and upgrades and consent and gifts and wills. Of course, those are critically important. In fact, of course, those are things we want to achieve in the long run. But they're a consequence of loyalty. They're behaviours that if we get loyalty right, we will achieve. And if we get it wrong, then obviously we'll see the other side of it, and attrition and lapse and the behaviours we really don't want to see. So today's going to be very much about what we can do to grow loyalty. And we've done a lot of research into, okay, if we want to grow loyalty, we need to understand what it is. And so our research, over 250,000 donors now, and it's available on our website. It's a free download. Go in and download it. So I'm not going to go into the detail of the research, but I just want to share a couple of the findings with you. That when we talk about loyalty, the first thing is we've tested a lot of drivers that sit behind loyalty. What is it that creates a loyal donor, a loyal supporter? And out of those, all the different drivers that we've tested over the years, there are three that constantly come forward as the most significant things that make someone feel loyal to the charities that they support. The first of these is commitment. Commitment is the passion for the cause, the passion for what you do, the passion for the change that you're creating in the world, the real belief that what you do is important. It's important to them that you are successful. When they believe that what you do is important to them, that's when they will be really committed to you as a supporter. The second of these is satisfaction. It's satisfaction with the way you communicate with them, the way you fundraise from them, the way you feed back to them, the way you treat them as a person. Do you treat them as an individual, as a person, or do you treat them as a cash point machine? It's making them feel really valued as an individual. And the third one is trust. Trust that you'll set out to do what you promise you will do, and that you'll do it well, and you'll use their donations well. And when you think about it, if someone feels passionately about what you're trying to achieve, they're happy with the way you communicate with them, they trust you to do it in the right way, of course that they're going to feel loyal to you. Now that we can understand what creates loyalty, what sits behind it, then we can start to, and these are all concepts: commitment, satisfaction, trust. These are all concepts that we can ask supporters about. And at the core of a lot of work we do is measuring loyalty, and we can measure how committed someone is towards your work. We can measure how satisfied they are with the way they communicate with you. We can measure how much they trust you. And for every single person that's completed our surveys, we can, on the back of that, we can create a loyalty score. And there's a big spread of loyalty. These are real donors, so you'd expect them to be very heavily weighted towards the higher end. And our score goes from 1 to 7, and most people are sort of 4, 4.5 or above. But you can see there's quite a spread there from 4, 4.5, all the way through to 5s, into the 6s, and even people at the very top. The 7s are super 7s, we call them, the people that absolutely love you. And why is that important? Because when we can give it a score, then one of the things we can do that is we can see how important is that score in terms of the behaviours we talked about. Again, I'm not going to go into the detail of the research. It is available to read. But what we saw is that this spread, as people move up, and as individuals and segments move up the loyalty score from 4s, 5s, 6s up to 7, what we see is for every 1 point they move up, we see a 20% more income from those people over the following 3 years. 20% more income coming in the door, and that's a combination of both higher retention and slightly higher amounts given. And we also see a 9% increase in those people in them wanting to leave you a gift in their will as well. So this is really serious. Loyalty is so important, not just because it's the right thing to do and it's a nice thing to do for our supporters and everyone will feel better. It's a really important thing to do to grow your loyalty, because it will generate more money for your charity and your beneficiaries in the future. So that's why loyalty. Why Loyalty Day? Because what I've said there, okay, there's some numbers behind it. What I'm saying there, I hope is sort of unarguable. So why do we have a day when we talk about it? Well, as we said, our first Loyalty Day was in 2017, and a lot has changed since then. Our first Loyalty Day was, if we're honest, Richard, it was probably 70 people sitting around thinking, what on earth are Richard and Roger going to talk about and this is, we had Tim Hunter, who was Director of Fundraising at Oxfam at the time, talking. I think a lot of people came in more curious than anything to it. A lot has changed since then, and a lot of it is good. We're seeing charities creating great experiences and thankathons and for their supporters, and investing in creating experiences. Sorry, should have put that slide up. We're seeing a change in insights and a proper investment in trying to understand why people give and what the motivations and what the needs are of our supporters. We're seeing some people measure to put measures in of how people feel and satisfaction, or in our case, loyalty, things like that. We're seeing some fabulous jobs created, and these are two sort of live jobs that are live on LinkedIn at the moment. So I shouldn't be pointing you towards there, as Richard's always said that we're about to start recruiting as well. But some really fabulous jobs that would never have existed 5 or 6 years ago. And our favourite job title of one of our clients is Tash at Diabetes UK, who is the excellent customer experience lead. And that job title wouldn't have existed in 2017. So great, but there's still a long way to go on this journey, because most of the sector, none of the sector is getting all this right, and some have more to further to go than others. And I think that part of the problem behind that is we're still having a lot of the wrong conversations in our charities. We're still driven massively by short-term fundraising targets. Now, in fairness, we are legally required to report in this way. We're legally required to report on income in this year, income in next year. And when we do that, what's the incentive for investment? But we've got to change that if we're going to be really successful. We're massively hung up on volume. And we to some extent, we even evaluate the support experience by whether we mail them too much, email them too much. And volume is not the driver of whether an experience is good. It's just something we count and measure. Far too much just copycat fundraising, or copying someone else, looking for a bandwagon to jump on. Sort of back in the day, it was direct marketing, then face-to-face came along and everyone jumped on that, and then value exchange. Sort of give us, we'll send you information if you give us permission to phone you, and then it was, more recently it's been Facebook ads, and all the different bandwagons that we sort of jump on, that mean that it's no wonder that giving to one experience to one charity is very similar experience to giving to any other, and maybe it isn't, but our donors perceive it to be, and that's a problem. And I guess you can probably pick for the examples I use there of face-to-face and Facebook and that side of things. A real focus on channels. And we tinker around with channels, and we really sweat the detail to get that extra 0.1% response rate. But actually, there are bigger things that we're not thinking about at the same time. So if we're going to do this right, if we're going to really grow loyalty, I really believe we need to change the conversation. And that's what today is about. So instead of talking about short-term fundraising targets, we've got to be looking at long-term. We've got to be, instead of talking about cost per acquisition, we've got to be talking about lifetime value, moving from response rate to retention rates, from this year's income to future years and legacies. Instead of talking about volume, we've got to talk about quality. I don't know about you, I sign up to some lists, and I know I'm going to get something every day because I'm interested in that subject, and what I get through every day is really interesting. And there's others where if they send me something once a year, that's too often. Volume isn't the right way to measure the effectiveness of your communication. If you create really good quality communications that people enjoy and are interested in, they'll be happy to receive lots of them. If your communications interrupt them and to talk about something they're not interested in, no matter how many you send, it's too many. We've got to be looking at quality. We've got to be changing, instead of copying everyone else's tactical techniques, we've got to look to be creating something that's unique for our supporters. If we can create something that they can only get when they give to us, of course they're going to be a loyal supporter, because they can't go anyone else. That's something valuable to them that they only get from us. And instead of focusing on channels, I'm not saying we shouldn't really sweat the detail of making them work, but instead of that focus entirely on there, we've got to be thinking about creating inspiring products and experiences. And I mean, think about Apple or Audi or Tesla or Microsoft or John Lewis. Do you think they start their years planning, thinking, how much are we going to spend on press inserts this year? Of course they don't. They start thinking, how am I going to create a product that is just, or service or an experience that is just better than anybody else's? And then they look at the media planning around that. Again, we've got to create things that are unique and special for our supporters. It's too important to get it wrong. When we get it wrong, the sector loses and the sector suffers. But also, when we get it right, there is so much value in doing it. I showed the numbers a little while ago. There's real value in doing it. So that's, for me, why Loyalty Day. It's an opportunity for us to talk, to us to share, to us to learn from each other, but it's an opportunity for us to change the conversation away from talking about numbers and budgets and spreadsheets to talk about people, because behind every number on a spreadsheet, there's a person. So I really hope you enjoy this afternoon. I hope you get some ideas to take away. And I'm as excited as you are to hear some of our speakers. Thank you.
Brilliant as ever, Roger, and such a great teeing up of a whole range of really fantastic presentations we've got lined up for you. So first up, we have Vanessa Byrne, who is Head of Fundraising at Australian Red. Vanessa Byrne, is some of the more observant of you might realise, it's actually 10 to 1 in the morning in Australia, and Vanessa was, up until yesterday, she was toying, oh, should I present live, should I record, should I present live, should I record? And we're very grateful that she did supply recording for us, so she's not presenting live, which is, as we'd all expect. But I would just very much like to hand over now to Vanessa to talk to us about what they're doing at Australian Red Cross.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Byrne and I'm Head of Fundraising at Australian Red Cross. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about our very important loyalty pillar, which we call Make Every Moment Matter. I'd like to just say thank you to Richard and Roger for inviting me to be part of the Loyalty Day. And sorry I can't be there live, but it is quite early in the morning in Australia, so I've wanted to record the session for you instead. I just want to start to give you a little bit of background on the journey that we've been on in the fundraising team at Australian Red Cross and what kind of has led us to our beautiful pillar of Make Every Moment Matter. So I joined the organisation in 2019. It was just before the 2019-2020 bushfires really sort of got to their peak. And I have to say, from the moment I started to today, it's been quite a full-on and relentless last couple of years. And, for someone, I have, 20 years fundraising experience, and I have to say I didn't expect to join Red Cross and to learn so much about donor loyalty and to evolve my learning and thinking, which has been fantastic. I'm going to talk a little bit more about bushfires, but you can kind of see here the high-level picture of the year. We've had bushfires, we've had global pandemic, obviously we've all been going through this and learning and evolving. But for Red Cross, as the largest humanitarian organisation in the world, we've also been dealing with, ongoing crises and emergencies, extreme weather events becoming
more intense and more frequent. So, sort of just have come out of the worst floods in 100 years. So, yeah, it's been a full-on time, but yeah, like I said, really given me some incredible insights into donors and the new way of donors and their thinking, and, what we need to do to be better fundraisers to offer them a better loyalty program than probably ever I have been done in the past. So yeah, the bushfires was a really interesting time for Red Cross. I don't know how much you all know about it, but we were, you know, one day it was an amazing, from a fundraising point of view, we were getting money given to us from hundreds of thousands, 600,000 people, in fact, donated to the bushfire appeal. We had Kylie ringing us, we had the royal family ringing us to make a donation. And it was all going fantastically well. And then literally overnight, the tides completely turned, and our donors and the public really turned against us. And this was all in response to some negative comments that one of our members of government had made about saying that we weren't giving out the money quick enough and that we were holding on to money. So there was a whole kind of media outrage around the administration fees and what we were doing with the money. And this really had a, you know, it was a huge disruption to our loyalty, and, you know, our trust was really put in jeopardy and became quite fragile. We knew our donors were deeply, deeply unsatisfied with us because they were ringing us up to tell us. We had bequesters saying they'd called their solicitors and had taken us out of their will. Our regular giving attrition spiked to levels like you wouldn't believe. It was insane. We had death threats. We had all sorts of things going on. So it was a very unpleasant time. But, you know, as a fundraiser, we had this sense of duty to our donors. So we kind of took a bit of a step back and really had to think hard about what we would do in order to turn that satisfaction around. You know, we did a brand tracker at that time, and our brand trust decreased by 8%, literally within a week or so. And then alongside of all of that, of course, we were getting all these donations coming in, but we've, you know, this whole kind of scenario with bushfires really disrupted loyalty, but giving, and it really reset attitudes to giving in Australia. So there's this incredible new pipeline of what we call needs responders, who really do behave very differently to your kind of average, what we call our everyday donor. So there was a lot going on, and we really, went through quite a lot of turmoil at that time. We, you know, made the decision to stop all of our proactive fundraising activity because so much money was coming in, and it really would have been tone deaf for us to keep asking for donations. But of course, you know, that didn't help the bottom line because the bushfire money was all tied to that appeal, and that was our duty of care to distribute it where we said we would. So since the bushfires, I guess we've been constantly adapting, you know, particularly in our loyalty space and what we do and what we deliver. You know, as I mentioned with the donors and the response that we had from donors, you know, including new donors or existing donors were asking for refunds from their donations just because they were so horrified by what was being said about us in the media. So we had quite a lot to do at that point. You know, the first thing really was, you know, how do we revive this lost love from our existing donors? You know, how do we win them back? You know, rebuilding trust was a big thing, not just for fundraising, but for the organisation, organisation-wide. So that was a big piece of work that happened there. You know, but also we needed to adapt to this you know, massive pipeline of new donors that were coming on board, and how could we make sure that we would get them to stick? How did we know we could sustain them? You know, would they be reliable donors? And, you know, what kind of rewarding experiences did we need to deliver them when we didn't really understand them as much as we thought we did? Although we'd had emergency donors previously, this was definitely a different time. Like I said, there was a real reset in attitudes to giving in Australia because of that bushfire experience. And of course, you know, at that time, and then ongoing really over the last couple of years, this kind of niggling feeling that's always there for us, which is needing to prove ourselves. You know, it's this constant feeling of we have to prove ourselves, reprove ourselves, prove ourselves again. You know, the bushfire negativity does rear its head every now and then, and people still, you know, the public, people in the public still bring it up. We still sometimes have donors that bring it up as well. So that's kind of 3 years down the track that is still hanging around a bit. So let's give you a little bit of context. What I want to do now is just kind of take you through what our strategy on a page is and where the loyalty pillar sits within that. And then I'm going to just take you through a few examples of what we've done over the last few years to really rebuild that trust and loyalty with our donors. And you'll see we can kind of retrofit the strategy work with the work that we did. So this is our fundraising strategy on a page, and as you can see there in the middle, our pillar 2, which is to, you know, our retention. We have acquire, retain, and grow, are our 3 really core fundraising pillars. And that middle pillar there, number 2, is about make every moment matter. And what the fundamental principles around that is that making sure that we connect with our donors, that we're creating really meaningful and engaging experiences that deepen that engagement, build trust, and build loyalty. All of these pillars link back up to our organizational strategy goals. And as you can see there, for that pillar 2, the outcomes really are about those reliable donor relationships. So we sort of talk about reliable being either, you know, someone who gives regularly, but also someone who might be a one-off donor, a single giver, as we call them, but to make sure that they are giving to us over and over again. And, you know, those key high-level goals for us under this pillar are around, you know, designing and delivering experiences that donors will love and remember, you know, connecting our donors to our purpose and our impact, and also inspiring two-way conversations to build trust. Now, this has been a few years in the making, this strategy, and it's really been built, as I mentioned, from the experiences that we've had since that sort of bushfire moment that, you know, really did reset not only giving attitudes, but also kind of our thinking around what we needed to do for our donors. So one of the first things that we did after when COVID hit, which was, you know, sort of, as I said, it was a few weeks after, really just a few weeks after we'd got through the tail end of the bushfires and the organisation had stopped being in that response mode and we were moving into recovery mode. And we were still dealing with the kind of aftermath of the negativity, and people still asking us for refunds and things like that was still going on. So there was still a lot that we had to deal with. And then 15th of March, we went into lockdown in Australia. So what we sort of did was take a bit of a step back, and once the organisation had started working through what our humanitarian response would be for the Australian public to COVID, we kind of had this moment, and it really was just one of those light bulb moments where we thought, you know, we need to involve our donors in this response. Like, how can we, you know, it would be remiss of us as the biggest humanitarian organisation in the world to not actually check in on our donors and involve them in our humanitarian response. So there were kind of 3 parts to this strategy. One was to do some check-in surveys. So these were literally to kind of say, what are you currently thinking? What are you currently feeling? Really trying to get to understand what our donors' motivations were at that time. Everyone was that beginning of COVID. If we think back, it was still that time when everyone was really unsure and really anxious about what was going to happen. So we kind of used the survey as a bit of a twofold tool. One was to really just say, hey, we're here for you. We're Red Cross, you know, we care about you. But the second part was just to ask them some pretty, you know, significant questions around what they might want to continue supporting at that time. You know, bearing in mind people were still feeling like everybody would stop giving and that, you know, we just didn't know what was going on. So we asked some really pertinent questions around that. We had the next campaign we had in market was what we call our tax campaign, which is our kind of end of financial year tax campaign. So we really wanted to understand what donors might consider giving to at that time. So we asked some very specific questions around what's the area of our work that you think needs the most support given the context of COVID. That was a really successful survey for us. So we got a lot of information from the general public, but also from our donors. And we used that information to tailor the communication that we set out for our tax campaign. And it was at the point our best performing the best performing tax campaign for Red Cross to date. We've subsequently beaten that every year since, but that really helped us inform that communication strategy and that narrative that we were going out to our donors with. The other thing we did was the 75,000 wellbeing calls. I think this is probably one of the things I'm the most proud of in my career, is that we did actually just call people to say, hey, are you okay? We're here for you. You know, we know things are tough, but we're Red Cross and you're important to us as much as anyone else. And the calls were phenomenally successful. The other thing we did was kind of produce and send out 1,000 wellbeing resources. So a bit of a value exchange for our donors. So we repurposed communications that had been developed by the organisation for our response to COVID, and we sent them out to our donors. So really beautiful work that happened there, and it really was about trying to win back the love lost and trust with our donors. We had some great outcomes. You can see there's some quotes there from our telemarketers who made the calls. But just in terms of the impact it had, just the difference between those donors who were called and who weren't, there was a 30% response rate for those donors who were called, compared to 15% response rate for people that hadn't received a call. So it definitely had an impact. That it wasn't the point or the purpose of it, but we did track that just to see if it did work. Our customer satisfaction scores were increased from about 7.3 to 8.9, which was really great outcome. We're continuing to do these calls to date now when we feel we need to, when we just think it's appropriate. When there was that sort of wave 2 COVID in Australia, we did those calls again, particularly to our bequesters. And the other thing that happened at the time, there are a lot of stood down staff, particularly from our first aid program, because of COVID and the lockdown, they were stood down or were put on gardening leave. So we engaged them to make some of those calls for us, which has also had a really twofold impact of having a great impact on morale. The second thing that we did at that time was to look at this pool of new donors that come in. Like I said, we had 600,000 people make a donation to us. Now, just to be really clear, only 70,000 of them opted in. So there was this kind of great organisation, everyone going, "It's amazing, we've got all these great pool of donors." But actually the reality was only 70,000 of them had opted in. But they were very precious to us because it was quite a gift for us to have that number of that we needed to and wanted to then steward. So what we did was a bit of a 3-step process where we did a really deep dive, focus group surveys, talking to these donors, asking them some very direct questions about how they wanted to be supported, how they wanted to be communicated with. We developed some personas. So as you can see here, this is Pragmatic Paula, and she was very clear with us on what we needed to do and when and how. And then that's how we use this information to build then our donor journey. So this kind of gives you a bit of a sense of what that looks like. But this was really built with, really looking at those insights from our donors to understand what they needed and what they would respond to. So a very deep dive in that sense, and then design the strategy based on the insights that we gleaned from those interviews and those focus groups with those donors. The next thing we've sort of done subsequently, which is part of our strategy now, is trying to sort of build products that are based on loyalty principles. And look, again, this has come out of that sort of journey that we've been on. And something that we've learned along the way about loyalty is that, connecting our donors to purpose and impact has a really positive effect on the loyalty of our donors and their satisfaction and their trust. So this is just an example of a product we've developed called the Red Cross 50. And again, it was a similar experience to when we talked to those disaster donors, but it was really sitting down with our mid-value donors. So what we define as mid-value is someone who's given between $500 and $9,999, and really developed a product that suited them. We needed this to be a sustainable product because a lot of these mid-value had come through that disaster pipeline. So we knew they had those similar behaviours where, they didn't really want to stick around for as long as other donors who've been recruited in other ways. So really this was about understanding what their needs were. Again, there were some very immersive interviews that were good 25, 30 minutes long with quite a few of these donors, just to ask them those really pointy questions. And then the information that we gleaned from that, we used to build the product design. So that's kind of just 3 examples of what we've done over the since that kind of bushfire moment of resetting and rethinking. I guess what we've learned is that during bushfires there were a lot of responsive actions. We had to respond very quickly to things that were happening because things were changing overnight. And what we sort of learned from that really was where we kind of coined this every moment matters term. It was like suddenly we were like anything and everything we did during that period could make or break loyalty or at donor trust or that relationship. So we've kind of, we learned from that responsive actions that, how do you take them and turn them into intentional actions? And I guess those examples I've just described, the wellbeing calls were very responsive. The design of that donor journey for disaster donors was probably a little bit of both, whereas that third example with the mid-value program, that was very intentional. So we really used everything we've learned over the years about loyalty to really build out that product idea. this is probably one of my favorite slides, I think, because we've coined this other phrase, I guess, at Red Cross at the moment, which is about relentless proof. So how can we relentlessly prove to our donors that they're important to us? And this is, as I mentioned, this niggling feeling is always needing to prove ourselves over the last few years. And it's, definitely remained, and it's definitely been there. So there's kind of two parts for this for us. I guess there's the relationship experience. So making sure that everything we deliver to a donor is really about them. So, understand me, value me, remember me. Once we've met them through whatever means that is, if it's a disaster donor or through a proactive acquisition channel like telephone or digital. But this virtuous circle of always thinking about that relationship experience around, do we understand our donors? Are we valuing them? Are we really remembering who they are? And that's a really key part of how we develop our relationship experience. And then on the right there, we have our sort of relevance and transparency triangle. There was a high demand from donors and the public for us to be transparent. That's still, it's always important for charities, but when we came out of the bushfire experience, it was more and more important, and a really, something that we were being asked of a lot. So we've kind of looked at this little triangle, which is more about how do we sort of frame up for our donors, and how do we remain relevant, and how do we ensure that we're as being transparent. So for us, it's really looking at what is our organizational strategy, constantly going back to that. Has it changed? Where do we play? Where won't we play? Where is funding needed? Understanding the trends and insights about how people want to give to us. Again, such a key insight, this new kind of wave of donors that these need responders coming in. And it's like, we know that they're different. It's about age and demographic, and just about how they give. So really understanding how this is changing and really keeping an eye on that through our internal research, but also external market trends. And then what's our narrative? We've realized that and learnt that it's so crucial that we own the narrative and that the narrative doesn't own us. So, what is that ongoing story that we need to tell to keep our donors engaged? So these are really two key parts to that kind of piece of ours, which we use to rebuild our loyalty with our donors after the bushfires, but now it's just become part of our strategy for us to continue to build loyalty with our donors. So I just wanted to share a few little sort of stats on how where we are at the moment in terms of what our donors are thinking and feeling. So we've introduced a monthly survey where we're asking some questions around that relate to trust and satisfaction and connection to Red Cross. So you can see from here that these are really pleasing results from a trust and satisfaction perspective. We've got a bit of work to do with some of those millennials and Gen X's, but you can see that our builders and our boomers are really, we've really turned that around from where it was previously, particularly during bushfires. This is just a little bit more insight into connection to Red Cross. So these are the questions that we ask on a monthly basis of different donors. So we're just building a knowledge base of, again, how people are feeling, how they're thinking, how they're connected to us, so that we can really use this as a bit of a canary in the coal mine, so that if any of these numbers start to drop, then we can have a bit of a look at, what kind of responsive action we would take, and or what kind of intentional action we need to take to maintain that loyalty with donors. Here's just a little bit of an example of revenue, which is obviously a part of loyalty, but not the most important thing when it comes to thinking about loyalty. But certainly this is just to show that we've been able to really grow the loyalty from our donor base. So from that sort of 2020 financial year to this is from 2021 to 22 financial year. And you can see that we've had quite a big uplift across our key appeals and overall. And then the graph on the right just shows that the disaster donors that we had acquired through the bushfires and how they've grown over the last couple of years in value. So this, just shows that we have been able to implement a good donor journey, and it's not just a one-night stand, which is really sometimes how it feels with those donors. So what are some key takeaways to share with you? I guess, I think for me, the top three really are just around that, donors really, we've learned that they really value being heard and involved. So taking the time, doing the surveys, chatting to them is so crucial to being able to deliver an experience that's relevant for them. you know, there's no one size fits all. I think it's just everything needs to be tailored, and that is something that we've learned. We've got some very clear segments and differentiation of our donors. So there's segments within segments, you know, sort of based on not just on that transactional, but really on that behavioural and that information that we've learned and gleaned from surveys over the years. So really important just to approach everything with that attitude of like, you know, it's going to be detailed and that's okay. And then I think the third key takeaway for me is just to own the narrative. Like, that's something that's been such a huge impact for us from a loyalty perspective. You know, we're driving that sort of what it is that we want to communicate to our donors, and we're really owning that narrative piece and evolving it. It's constantly evolving to make sure that it's relevant, and that, you know, it's a way for us to prove to our donors that their donations are worthy, you know, that our organisation is worthy of their donations and their investments and their support. One of the great things that's also come out of this Make Every Moment Matter pillar is this incredible sense of collaboration. We've now got a what we call the Knitting Circle, which is a cross-team group of our experienced delivery leads who have been allocated a specific time and space to focus only on donor loyalty. So they meet each week. Our experienced delivery leads are they're like like a regular giving coordinator, but their responsibility is to make sure that we're delivering the best donor experience possible for the cohort that they're looking after. So, you know, the managers and the team and I have given time and space for them to absolutely focus on this, and they're building a really beautiful strategy. And it's called the Knitting Circle because it's all about them kind of knitting together to create this, you know, this wonderful donor loyalty program. And, you know, our goal is for it to be the best in Australia. I hope that's given you some good insights into what we've been doing. I know I can't be there to answer any questions, but please do feel free to email me, and I will be happy to answer any questions, or happy to set up a call with anyone at a time that suits to go through anything that's in the presentation. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Vanessa. And there's been 3 questions in the Q&A. Yeah, Vanessa's been very clear. She said that if you want to send them over, if you want to like, if you want to send those to her directly, call her, arrange a chat, whatever that is, then please do just get in touch with her with those questions. I'm happy to send them over as well, and then we can maybe can reconnect over those. I'm now going to very quickly hand over to Roger, who's going to give us a loyalty bite, a bit of sprinkling of magic loyalty dust. And I think it really draws on some of the themes that Vanessa's been talking about. So over to you, though, Roger.
Thank you, Richard. So I'm going to pop up every now and again through the afternoon and give you what we're calling it 3-minute insights. This one's going to be 2 minutes because we're already slightly late, I'm afraid, on this. But just picking up on one of the themes that we're or some of the themes that we're going to hear about. And you've heard Vanessa there talk quite a little bit about trust, and particularly at the start, the trust that was destroyed, and then everything they did to try and recover that trust. And I thought I'd just share a little bit more about kind of what we mean by trust, because it's something we as a sector, I think, sometimes get wrong. Often we talk about things like directors' salaries, and we talk about the percentage spent on programs, or the percentage spent on admin, or the percentage spent on, oh no, surely not, fundraising. But when we talk to donors, we hear something different from them. And these are the questions we ask when we ask about trust. We ask about whether you trust us to deliver the outcomes we promise, or whether you believe that you trust us to behave in the right way. And the last question, whether you think we can be counted on to use your money appropriately. What donors want to see is whether or not we're effective, whether or not we do what we promise we're going to do. They want to see your success stories. They want to see that you are, whatever it is, saving children's lives, or the good news stories about the bears you've rescued. With Greenpeace, it was that moment where Lego sort of caved in and dumped shell there. They want to see those success stories. Yes, you've seen from Vanessa's presentation, it can take seconds to destroy trust, and then it takes a while to build it. But you can build it. It is something you can do. These stories give impact. If you tell the stories of impact, and if you give them proof that you're being successful, that is what donors are looking for, and that's when they'll trust you again when you can give them the proof of the impact and the effect that you are having.
Brilliant. Thank you. Absolutely fantastic. I think now I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Viktoria Rowe, who's the Director of Global Insight at Compassion, who's going to share with us what Compassion have been doing and about fulfilling supporter needs, looking at segmentation, journey mapping, but it's all around that focus on how can we grow loyalty. So big welcome to Viktoria, who's live from the United States. Is it Texas you're in? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. That's right.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. We've gone from one side of the world, Australia, all the way over to Texas. Over to you. You should be able to share your slides when you're ready.
Okay, let me try to do that right now. And Richard, can you see that? Okay.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. Brilliant.
Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. Yes, it is a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm coming to you from the US. It's my morning, so you might see a cup of coffee here with me. I'm still trying to wake up, so forgive me if I stumble over any of my words here. Let's try to figure out how to run the screen. There we go. Okay, well, as Roger said, I'm Viktoria Rowe, and I have the privilege of working as Global Insight Director at Compassion International for the last 3 years now. My role is really to support local teams. So local compassion teams, there are 12 marketing and fundraising teams who run 14 distinct compassion brands. And my job is really to equip team members with insight and strategic recommendations that build commitment, satisfaction, and trust within their own workforce, as well as with donors or at supporters, as we like to call them at Compassion. So while this is my first job in the NGO space, and I'm so grateful to be here in this NGO community with you today, it's not my first role in loyalty building. I have over 15 years of experience in for-profit consumer insight, data strategy, and CX innovation, which has afforded me opportunities to learn about people as consumers and producers, life jugglers, and influencers, all in an effort to curate exceptional experiences that engage them more deeply. And today, I'm very honored to be here with you to share a little bit about Compassion, what we do as a charitable mission, who we are as a global organization, and why both of those factors matter so much in how we build loyalty at scale. So at first, a bit about Compassion and what they do as a multinational Christian nonprofit organization. So in short, Compassion runs programs through local churches in developing countries aimed at releasing children from poverty through a holistic child development approach. Compassion fundraises in 14 countries. You heard me mention that earlier. I'll be referring to them as our global partners. What we do, primarily, we do this through a child sponsorship product. And we currently have 1.5 million supporters who sponsor children today. Collectively, Compassion serves more than 2.2 million babies, children, and young adults by partnering with over 8,500 churches in 27 developing countries. So there's a lot of stats I just threw at you, all of which are on the slide here. But overall, what you should know is we're doing quite well as an organization, but we do have some big opportunities in front of us. Programmatically, we've seen steady growth in the number of children we've been able to help, but there are over 356 million children who struggle to survive on less than $1.90 a day. And we, as I mentioned, the 2.2 million we serve today, we want to be able to do more. We want to be able to help more of those 356 million that need help. And on our fundraising side, as I mentioned, we have 1.5 million compassionate supporters who are in every way just as much of a partner in this mission as we are as employees. However, there are 93 million people in the countries that we currently fundraise in who we would consider to be our strategic target, many of whom would be very interested in supporting the mission of Compassion if they were aware of who Compassion is and what we do for children in poverty. So we have an opportunity to build brand awareness and resonance, but now the real challenge that I'm posing to you is many of those who are aware of Compassion only see us as a child sponsorship organization. And many of the current supporters that we have today are actually building deeper loyalty with their specific child that they're sponsoring and not with compassion. Now, of course, we want to welcome that relationship. That is what we're about. But in doing that, we actually lose the opportunity to build a relationship with that supporter that could help many more children in the future. So it is something that we're thinking very deeply about. So all of these things, I've given you sort of the stats, the challenges, the opportunities, and many of those things is what we as Compassion had been wrestling with for quite some time. But before making any sort of tactical decision, what we did as Compassion is we really reflected inward on the way that our people operate, both in the field and those operating in our fundraising countries. And really what we saw was rich meaning and importance in how we welcome one another and how we show compassion to one another that wasn't being owned as part of who we were. And that really made us stop to think, how do we reframe ourselves around who we really are? And we decided to do that really by saying, we're going to reframe ourselves around a scriptural promise to love our neighbor as ourselves. To our organization, this promise is much broader than becoming customer or supporter-centric. It sets a foundation that considers people within, throughout, and outside the organization. And it's important to us because this mission is so much bigger than our organization and so much greater than ourselves even, that we want to be able to really root ourselves in who we are. Now, if you're familiar with this scripture, what you may recall is the immediate question right after Jesus says this is, who is our neighbor? Well, of course, when we think about that as well, we think about, of course, the children and youth who our mission serves is our neighbor. The frontline church partners are the absolute heart of the work that we do. We have a hardworking, dedicated workforce who, of course, is our neighbor. But we also have our supporters. And that today is where we see the biggest gap in how we love and know them well. So with this understanding in place and aligned really with that scriptural promise at the executive level, we began to think about a path that we needed to take internally across Compassion Global Partners to really see impact in the work that we were doing in building loyalty. So the first here is really creating alignment across executives. This really excelled through having an executive sponsor in our CMO and our VP of Global Marketing. They were consistent, not only in talking about serving neighbors well, but they were willing to invest where they could in the work that would help shift culture to get us there. Now, the other three puzzle pieces that you see here, I'm going to touch on, but I'm actually going to go in further depth on them in the coming slides. The first here is to be successful in creating that paradigm shift that we wanted to happen with our fundraising and marketing teams in the way that they operated. We first needed to have alignment from global partners on why this work was so important. We needed to develop and communicate our brand story well for our workforce and for our supporters to really rally around who we were, who we are. And that's taken some time and diligence, and we're definitely still on a path toward that, but we are definitely making progress in that direction. Additionally, the biggest gap in our knowledge, as I mentioned, was with our supporters. So understanding our supporter needs was something that we know we wanted to invest in. And we had really focused on doing this through a global supporter segmentation study, which I'm going to share details on. And lastly, we wanted to ensure that successful change management really happened. And through this, we focused on educating and collaborating with local partners through the use of journey mapping, which leverages experience research to aid in the development of innovative strategies. Journey mapping became a way for our teams to see a touch point of a supporter interaction and begin to think about how that relates to the overall customer experience, the overall supporter experience. So you've learned a bit about what compassion does. Now let me introduce you to who we are. Because we're rooted in loving our neighbors as ourselves, we needed to tie that back to what that means in interacting with our supporters. And as we frame it currently, we exist to inspire and enable neighbors to move with compassion in the way of Jesus. We welcome supporters into this mission of breaking the cycle of poverty for children around the world by understanding supporters, valuing them for who they are, and bringing them into a community of purpose and fulfillment. So this means that compassion now owns a responsibility to supporters that goes beyond operations. We're not seeking to build loyalty by only making sure their credit card payments run smoothly or that they get updates on their sponsored child. It goes so much deeper than that in what we're promising. It's seeking to fulfill those higher order needs a supporter has in giving their time, talent, and treasure to this mission. Feelings of accomplishment, self-worth, and belonging. And we also know that we needed to measure our success differently. From dollars raised to creating relevant, life-changing experiences for all that connect with compassion. And that was a big shift as well. Okay, so next, we set out to fill the gap we had in understanding our neighbor needs, our supporter neighbor needs. We focused research efforts via traditional survey, but I do want to just point out that there are a number of voice of neighbor mechanisms that you could do to gain a sense of understanding of your neighbor needs. For example, call center feedback or social web data or CRM systems. But for compassion, we really set out to conduct a multi-country survey to develop global supporter segmentation. And we did this with 3 guiding pillars to our work that you'll see here. The first is that we wanted to ensure that our work was globally representative, meaning we wanted the work to accurately reflect the global distribution of our Christian strategic target, looking at both our current supporter base as well as our prospective supporter base and weighting those audiences across the globe accordingly. So obviously we would weight higher with those prospective supporters because there's much more opportunity than we have currently today. And then we also looked at Christian populations around the world to understand where is our target the biggest. And we weighted accordingly. Now, secondly, we were very intentional about what we wanted to understand about supporters. We wanted to identify supporter needs and giving specifically so that we could develop strategies and tactics that would serve them in more meaningful ways. So in our data analysis, we focused on how to zoom in on those core common needs. And we absolutely anticipated that these needs could be localized, and we were willing to honor that. So we had done the study across 8 different countries, and we thought for sure there would be at least one country that pulled out its own unique need and segment, and we were very happy to honor that. But what we learned was that the core needs were actually universal across our supporters, and there was nothing incredibly distinct with what we were finding at that cultural local level. And our third guiding pillar that we wanted to make sure that we had was we wanted to make sure that the outputs were holistic. So while we were very focused on the core needs of supporters, we also wanted to have a real picture, a real understanding of who these supporters were. So we didn't just ask questions about their giving or their feelings toward child sponsorship. We asked about their faith, the media they consume, their sources of influence, what causes inspire and motivate them, because we really did want to see them as real people. And we wanted the segments to inspire and challenge us to dream up new ways of serving them for many years to come. So the output of this work helped us understand that we have 5 needs-based segments in our supporter target, represented by the little characters you see here. So we have our thoughtful neighbor who needs to direct their financial giving in a way that they trust it will achieve maximum impact. We have a passionate neighbor who needs a platform for their voice to move others into action. We have a helper neighbor who needs to participate in a community to put their skills to use to serve others. We have a caring neighbor who is moved by their deep empathy and feels that need to give responsively in that moment when they see others in need. And we have our curious neighbor that needs guidance and motivation to confidently deepen their giving. Now, we analyzed the data and conducted in-country interviews on our segments so we could then have a real voice to put back to these segments, back to the numbers, back to the data that we were gathering. And we invested in a small but effective internal campaign geared toward our workforce with the goal of having them build understanding and empathy of our supporters. We had the little characters I mentioned earlier. We had them developed to represent our segments versus traditional persona profiles. And we did this intentionally to keep a sort of culture neutrality to the segments, allowing each of our global partners, our local teams, to add their own cultural layer if they so desired. And then we charged ahead. So operationalizing this work looked very different for every market. But for our larger markets, we focused on journey mapping as a next step to help continue to drive cultural change with their local teams. So journey maps were really used to give teams a deeper insight into each of the segments' experience and hone in on those moments that matter as a way for teams to start prioritizing their strategy. We first worked with teams to draw out their own hypothesis of what that supporter experience was like. And then we leveraged the segment insights that we had to understand what was truly happening. We also analyzed emotional drivers across the journey that we wanted to see how those emotional drivers were actually helping to achieve the supporter outcomes that we had hoped to get. And on the flip side, we also looked at those emotional drivers as a way to say, what is hindering, what moments and what emotions are hindering the outcomes that we want to achieve? In other words, we wanted to understand how we needed to make them feel, each segment feel, across key moments of the journey in order to build deeper loyalty with them. And this is really a really useful tool. This journey mapping has been a really useful tool for unifying our global and local teams and helping them develop tests and strategies to meet supporter needs. If nothing else, it gets everybody on the same page, speaking the same language, and working together to prioritize and identify opportunities of innovation. And we had some markets also interested in taking a data-first approach, coding our segmentation algorithm into their CRM systems. So this meant developing a structure within their CRM systems to be able to capture this information. And secondly, it meant a strategy needed to be put in place to capture the segment profiles of as many supporters as they could. Because when we originally conducted this study, we grabbed only a small sample of supporters needed. So now the goal was really, how do we get as many supporters as we can within our database segmented? And their goal of doing this was really to gain first an understanding of segments at an operational level. So tying appropriate CRM or digital insight to segment profiles would help them go deeper in innovating. But also, it gave them enough supporters recognized in their database where at the segment level, they could start running communication tests in a more automated way to see really what's working and what's not and be able to pivot very quickly. All right, so I'm going to wrap up here shortly, but what we learned that I think is crucial to share with you, executive leadership alignment, I think, is the most crucial thing to success. Leadership alignment, even in areas outside of marketing and fundraising, because as I mentioned, the impact of this work goes way beyond just supporters. And really having everybody think in a way that is rooted in our purpose was so valuable. Additionally, no matter how you conduct your research and gather your insights on supporters or donors, allowing your workforce to spend time really understanding supporters and donors is so valuable in setting that foundation for neighbor centricity, because it helps put a real person at the other side of who they're serving. And because learning isn't for the sake of learning, but for creating that culture of empathy and innovation. So it's also the practice of taking time to understand, which slowly gets rooted in your culture. And slowly that culture starts to evolve of one of empathy, innovation, and empowerment to serve supporters well. So thirdly, never underestimate the lift needed for change management. It takes intentionality, education, training to equip team members with the confidence to be able to work outside their norm, right? To really push the needle, move in innovative ways to improve supporters' experience. It's cultural. It really has to be embedded into the culture. We constantly asked ourselves as we were moving through this multi-year process, how do we make supporter insights engaging and inspiring? How do we work with teams on the follow through? So we're not just presenting them insights, but we're really their partner in moving them into strategy and tactical elements that are going to help improve the experience. So really quickly, some learnings in working globally. We learned that collaborating with local teams in the early stages of work is essential for successful rollout. So once we had data back from our segmentation study, we analyzed the segmentation work together. There were several different solutions, and we actually went to each global partner that participated in the study and asked for their opinion on what that final segmentation solution should be. Luckily, they all chose the same solution, but again, we were willing to flex and honor any partner that really chose a different path forward. They were all involved in naming the segments as well and prioritizing the segments that they wanted to begin actioning and learning more about. Now, this collaboration not only helped move segmentation forward in actual use, but it helped in socializing the work out globally because we already had advocates in place to do this well. Again, it's a cultural element that's so important. Now, a must for us was also thinking about the opportunity outside of just our current state. So we were really intentional about understanding prospects as well as current supporters and weighting that accordingly within our research. And the last thing I'll call out is in socializing our segments, we understood that we needed to keep our creative elements culturally neutral. Our internal campaign made the segments and data fun and engaging, while each country could implement their own local spin on the work. And this is an example, this image of Meet Our Supporters is an example of how our Australia team did just that. They took real people within Australia and then developed those profiles needed to really deeply go into their neighbor needs and understand a little bit more at that local level, at that Australian sort of nuanced way. So really quickly on our path ahead, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments about this, but we really see it as twofold for our global team. So one is we want to start understanding what's working through monitoring and longitudinal measurement. We have an experience measure that's been validated, and now it's really time to start leveraging that measure well as we start to shift and alter the customer journey a little bit, the supporter journey. We really want to understand what's working well. And second is facilitating forums with teams to learn from one another now that we have a common language in place. So again, we have 12 global partner teams that we work with who are really what we consider on the front lines of meeting supporter needs. I sit at the global level, so we're almost one step removed. At this point in time, we really feel like it's at that local level where teams can start learning from one another and gain insight and knowledge and best practices that they're each trying out. And really our job is just to document and really understand what are those common themes coming up? Where can we help support along the way? So thank you so much. That is all I have to share. I will open it for any discussion, questions, or comments here.
Thank you, Viktoria. Absolutely brilliant. Really, really fascinating. Doing so much amazing work around data, emotions, needs, motivations, loyalty. Really good. We've got time for a question, and the question I'm going to pick comes from the chat from Alessandro. And this relates to when you're measuring commitment, satisfaction, and trust across your different segments, or you're measuring the experience across your different segments. How do you adapt your strategy to like kind of those different results across different segments?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I can tell you, we're on a journey toward that. What we're doing right now is trying to gather enough data to be able to say, okay, now we have enough data within the segment level to start to get into that a little bit deeper. So we're kind of doing this in two ways. One is we have an overall experience measure that measures sort of the commitment, satisfaction, and trust. But what we also have is deep journey insight on each segment. So what we're hoping to do is once we have enough data at the segment level with that experience measurement, and that's going to take a bit of time, we're looking to try to do a couple of studies a year across global partners, and then also with some key partners, really look at key moments of the journey where we're measuring that note, gather that information. We also have that segment information in place. And now we're going to start to go in a little bit deeper and understand what are those emotional drivers that it's really leading to that commitment, satisfaction, and trust. And then how do we tweak that along that specific journey? So it's a multi-step process, and we're currently not there. Right now, it's all about gathering enough data to be able to get there and dive into that.
Brilliant. I love it. So many people we work with have that kind of not crossroads, but at that stage in the journey. So I don't know if we'll ever get to the end of that journey, will we? Because we'll always be looking to
Right.
Every step that you take, it uncovers more questions and more opportunities to find out more. So thank you, Viktoria. A big round of applause. Absolutely fantastic presentation. Really delighted. Also, thanks to Alessandro for the question. And now I'm going to hand over to Roger for a bit more of a loyalty magic dust.
Thank you, Viktoria, so much for that. And I'm going to pick up on one of the themes you talked about: commitment, satisfaction, trust. And I've already talked about trust. I'm going to talk about commitment this time. Just give a very quick thoughts on that. And for us, we talk about commitment a lot, and we talk about it because out of the three drivers, the three main drivers of loyalty, commitment is the most significant. You do need all three, but commitment is the most significant of them. It's the one that has the most impact. So it's important that we really understand what we mean by it. For us, we ask questions around whether people care passionately about the work you do, or they have a passion for the goal, and then whether they're committed to their relationship with you. And I think it's important to pick up on this. Commitment is when they're really passionate about your cause. It's when they really believe that what you're doing is important, and it's important to them that you are successful. It's about what you're trying to achieve, not what you do, not how you do it. None of this, our model of development is better than your model of development. It's about the goal that you're trying to achieve, the change you're trying to make in the world. It's why this was one of the most successful fundraising ads ever, because it's not talking about, it would have been so easy to say £10 will pay for a cataract operation, but it's not talking about the what we do. It's talking about the absolutely inspiring ability to make a blind man see. I can get excited about the fact that I'd like another cataract operation to happen, but what I can really get excited about is a blind man seeing again. And that's the exciting thing for the donor. And that's when I'll get really committed to what the charity does and what the charity is trying to achieve. And it's why some of the most iconic brands in the sector, and apologies for a global audience, most of this is rather UK centric here, but it's why some of the most iconic brands in our sector have been so successful, because they're talking about the goal. They're not talking about the what, the campaigning, the scientists in white coats, the model, the social workers, etc. They're talking about the fact that we need to save the Arctic. We need to stop children dying. No one should face cancer alone. Then it's when we talk about the goal. So when we talk about the goal, when someone really believes that your goal is important, it's important to them, that's when they will be really committed to you and to your charity.
Thank you, Roger. That really was a 3-minute insight. Perfect. So now, I'm absolutely delighted. As you'll have seen advertised, we're welcoming. It keeps crashing out. Every time I try and share my screen, my Zoom crashes out and comes back in again. So I do apologise, but I hope it's not interfering with the delightful content. So Jason and Rachel were advertised to speak from Heartstroke Canada and Blakely. Rachel, unfortunately, isn't feeling so well today, but she is there offering her full moral support. And Maeve, who's Vice President of Client Relationships at Blakely Fundraising, is very kindly works alongside both Jason and Rachel to do the presentation. So thank you to Maeve, thank you to Jason, thank you to Rachel, and I will I'll just check that yeah, we can hand over to you guys, present your slides, and delighted to hear about the work you're doing together, the fun work.
Fantastic. So I'm going to share my screen and do that classic confirmation that we're all so used to now. Can you see my screen?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. So yes, I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm sorry you're not getting Rachel Honeybun, my amazing colleague. She, for those of you who know her and for those of you who don't, she's a fantastic and passionate presenter. But I'd like to consider myself the same. And I also have the pleasure of being along for most of this journey with Rachel and Jason, so I can speak to the story we're sharing today with definitely my own experience tied to it. So really happy to be here. I'm sharing a few kind of case studies around how Heart and Stroke and Blakely together have been able to apply some amazing insights and create a really relevant donor experience, which is a big part of the point we want to make. So first, we'll introduce ourselves. And again, for the last time, I'm not Rachel Honeybun. I'm Maeve Strathy, and as introduced, I'm the Vice President of Client Relationships at Blakely. My pronouns are she and her, and just to tell you a teeny little bit about Blakely, we are based just outside of Toronto in Canada, though we work across North America and occasionally in the UK as well. We are a fundraising and marketing agency. We do a lot of direct marketing work with a lot of our clients, but we also have a great area led by Rachel of strategic solutions, where we offer basically a lot of different products and services that help our clients drive a better donor experience at the end of the day. So we'll share some of those today around affinity surveys and different donor research and donor journey building and donor product building that really takes programs to the next level. So that's a little bit about myself and Blakely, and I'll pass over to Jason to introduce himself before we jump in.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Novelli. I'm very excited to be here. I am the Senior Manager of Intermediate and Monthly Giving at Heart and Stroke Canada. Intermediate, also known as mid-level, not sure how we define things, and monthly giving. So they are similar, but quite different portfolios. I've been working in the sector for over 15 years, both in the UK and in Canada. I am American, to just further complicate things. And Heart and Stroke really is one of the, it's a very large charity in Canada, and we do everything. We do research, advocacy, education, the whole gamut of things related to heart and stroke health in Canada. So I'm really happy to talk about these kind of two specific projects that we worked on with Blakely, and I hope that you'll find some tactics that you can use back in your work when you get home.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. So we will dive right in. So the first point we want to make super clear for this this kind of case study that we're sharing is that when we talk about donor experience or talk about donor journey, it's not about what starts from the point of the first gift. It's actually the point of acquisition, the engagement and the awareness somebody has of your organization before a gift is made. We really think, and we're passionate about this at Blakely, that donor experience starts long before the first gift is made. So when you think about what you're sending out for acquisition communications, what you're sharing on your social media channels, what people are seeing about you, what's on your website, that all plays into the donor experience that we're talking about. So with our work with Heart and Stroke, what we wanted to do was work together to create and elevate the donor experience, again, right from the get-go, right from the acquisition point, and really offer, this is a really, really important piece of the story we're telling, really offer relevance, more relevant products and ways of supporting the organization to really tap into the donor motivations that we are uncovering, and to deliver something to donors that really, really inspired them. So what we had to do is really dig in and understand what those motivations are. And so we were really, really fortunate to partner with Heart and Stroke on 2 different affinity surveys intended to understand the donor motivations for both these audiences. And as Jason introduced as part of his intro, he covers both the mid-level and monthly audiences. And so we were able to dig into both. Now, what you need to know about both is that they were in very different stages, the 2 programs. So for mid-level or intermediate giving or mid-value giving, whatever you like to call it, there was actually no kind of formal product and offer at the time that we were doing these affinity surveys. So we were starting really from, from the foundation on that program in particular. Whereas in monthly, it was actually quite a different story. There was a formal product called the Breakthrough Fund that had been around for about 7 years. And so it was kind of in, I wouldn't say mature stage, but it was definitely in a very different stage from mid-level. But in either case, in both cases, we took the same approach, beginning with an affinity survey. Again, really, really intended to understand and unpick what motivates those donors. And what we focus on, when we do affinity surveys is those motivations, those donor needs. And it's an interesting conversation that we often have with clients about who we're reaching, because often they'll say, well, we're missing this group and we're missing that group. But for us, it's actually about identifying and reaching out to the most engaged people in your program. It's okay that not everybody's going to respond to the survey. We aren't expecting that or looking for that. What we really want to find is your most engaged supporters so that we can build an experience that attracts that type. So it's not about pleasing all people all of the time. It's actually about attracting the best type of donor that has the best chance of being, hopefully, a lifelong donor to your organization. So when we did these surveys, we were really able to start understanding what motivated these donors and these distinct groups, audiences of mid-value and monthly. So in fact, the top 2 motivations for these groups were largely the same, but there were some great nuances. So we're going to spend the next little bit kind of breaking out the mid-level and monthly audiences to kind of understand how we took those motivations and developed propositions that were really, really relevant for these groups. In the case of mid-level, it was about developing a proposition that leaned into the motivation around improving treatments, as you see here. And then in the case of our monthly donors, our story is actually going to be more about how we're using the insight that you see here of in-memory donors to test a slightly different approach to monthly conversion. So different stories, but all started with very, very similar motivations. So we're going to start with mid-level. And before I pass it over to Jason, I'm just going to kind of share a couple key insights to set the stage on the mid-level group. So the overall insight from this group was that they were motivated by more short-term work. So it wasn't about, really, really long research projects per se, but something that really resonated with this group was the idea of research that was really close to its goal and that they could kind of get something over the line. That was something that really resonated with this group. They were inspired by urgency and need. And so we really had to wrap all of this into the proposition, the fundraising proposition that we were putting in front of this group. In terms of the product development and what was kind of driving that, there was a big leaning towards directing funds either to heart or stroke work specifically, or a specific project or that type of thing. In just a moment, Jason is going to speak to why this was a challenge. But an easier piece of the pie was that these donors were keen on getting insider information and exclusive invites. So something you've maybe seen in your programs too, this idea of something a little bit behind the scenes is really appealing to this group investing in you at a higher level. And then lastly, on the content side of things, what was really, really important here was sticking to tangible treatment outcomes. So something that we saw in the research. Again, this idea of being close to goal, nearly there, that needed to really, really come through. And there was also a need to, even though this was a little more secondary, ensure that there was an inclusion of content with, value to the individual from kind of a health perspective. So things like recipes are very popular, so finding ways to integrate that, information around symptoms, those types of things, really, really important to be part of the journey. So that gives you a bit of a sense of what we were learning. But from here, I'd like Jason, if you could jump into explaining kind of the barrier around this idea of designating gifts. I think that would be really helpful for the group here.
Absolutely. So as Maeve just reviewed, we learned so much from this affinity survey. We went from no knowledge and kind of applying a very broad fundraising, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks approach, to having a very clear idea of what content and what the proposition should look like. So that was, to be honest, the easier part to action. We can focus content. The product development, developing a fund, a specific legal fund that people could donate to specific projects, it became so cumbersome. We involved the lawyers from the organization, which, I think we need to say, makes things very complicated. There were certain financial limits that projects had. So the idea of a donor donating to a specific researcher doing a project that, really impacted them personally, it's a great idea, but just the logistics were going to take years to even figure out how we could do that, what researchers we had in the pipeline. So it wasn't possible to really put a designated fund in a legal sense out to our donors. But if we could speak to what the specific projects and speak in those terms of projects that were close to breakthroughs, things that personally affected them, we wondered if a more general fund would be something that was appealing to them and increase their level of giving. So that's kind of where we went with the Edge Fund. And we, if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so we came up with the Edge Fund, which is the idea of research and projects that are close to completion, things that are really going to impact that donor specifically in their life and their family's lives. We took what we learned from the affinity survey and really just put it right on display for them. So we created this landing page. So everything was going through this view of heart and stroke instead of the broader view of heart and stroke. So we were very plain with I don't know if you can see, but the features and benefits of being part of the Edge Fund. So this was an internal link, meaning that the people that were in the mid-level program were the only ones that saw this. So we really wanted to feed back to them what they had told us and what we learned from the affinity survey. And we used tactics like, what are people like you saying, kind of that social proof, that you are in the right place, and feeding them research and donor stories that were relevant to them instead of, like I said, the more kind of broad-based approach. The other thing we learned from the affinity survey is what people really weren't interested in. Now, advocacy is extremely important, but this was not a motivating factor. So we were able to de-emphasize the things that were not going to, have a donor make a gift. And this was launched. We'll get to the kind of the results of how this all played out. But at the same time, we launched a key piece, so our key fundraising piece, which used the Edge Fund branding, and we next slide. And we wanted to be consistent with the signatory. In the past, we had signatories, from all over the organization, sometimes within a campaign, different folks. So we really wanted to give them a point of contact, and it's our vice president of research, Diego, so that they felt comfortable, that they could get to know the organization from a personal level. We use lots of different direct mail tactics, such as using a full page coupon, just really giving the program space to understand for people. We know that with the affinity survey, that these people were a bit more engaged. They had a higher level of understanding of the organization, and we wanted to tailor the piece to that. The other interesting thing is we launched a key piece. So we really expanded on the ideas and gave them a bit more in-depth idea of the research that we were doing and how it would affect them in their lives. And we heard that our donors wanted exclusive special content. So we worked with a researcher, Dr. Perret, and we let our donors ask him questions. You know, and the questions that came up were nothing unexpected, but, you know, how does research work? How do you get funded? What would happen if you had more funding? And we gave them an opportunity to really interact with the researcher. And we created a Zoom. It was a very cheap and cheerful kind of tactic where we asked Dr. Perret those questions and then put it back on the Edge Fund site. So it was a really engaging tool to deepen the connection with the organization, because, you know, not everybody can actually go to his lab in Montreal and have a conversation, but it really felt like you were there with him and he was answering these very you know, basic questions about how funding works, and it really felt like donors were being heard. And I think, you know, during COVID, it was the closest thing to an in-person connection we could have with a researcher. So the results of this pilot, you know, it wasn't perfect. There were lots of bumps along the road, but we did see that the folks that were getting the Edge Fund did perform slightly better. They were giving more. They were more engaged. They had higher email open rates. And the other thing is that there was the brand recognition for this Edge Fund was quite high. It was 41% after about a year, which compared to the monthly giving that had been in market for 7 years. We had used that branding for a long time. So I think there was an appetite for kind of a special exclusive place for these donors to land. And so we rolled out the Edge Fund to all donors. And in the end, you know, we didn't offer a designated fund, but the follow-up was that the donors realized that there wasn't as much of a need for a designated fund because we were focusing the content on the relevant information.
That's right. Thank you so much, Jason. An advance warning, this feels like Murphy's Law is at work this morning, but my fire alarm was just going off. So if for some reason it comes back, I don't know. I don't know what between Rachel and I we're going to do, but we'll figure it out. Anyway, fingers crossed it continues. What I want to do is reinforce that last point that you made around trust and designation. I think this is so brilliant. You know, I think a lot of organizations can appreciate and empathize with Jason's experience on the designation piece and how much of a barrier that is, and how challenging it is, you know, frankly, just to kind of have to work in that way. So the fact that focusing on relevance and content and meeting the needs of donors was able to build that trust enough to shift that need to designate, I think is such a great testament of applying understanding and insights to change the donor experience. It really couldn't express that better. So moving on to monthly, which Jason was alluding to, is a bit of a different story. This was where, you know, we weren't starting from scratch. There were a lot of assumptions around how things were, a lot of opinions already formed. This is, I laughed with Rachel about the fact that I have indeed had Marmite before, so I can actually share this analogy with some experience. But Rachel was saying the Breakthrough Fund was a bit like Marmite. Some people loved it, some hated it. Everybody had an opinion. So definitely a different position going in than it was with mid-level. So when we dove into the insights here, what we found was actually, and Jason alluded to this, most donors were totally unaware that they were part of the Breakthrough Fund. Despite this being in market for such a long time, it wasn't something that was resonating. And actually, while the fund, the idea of breakthroughs, was really focused on research, there were actually large numbers of monthly donors that were more interested in prevention work. So in fact, the idea of breakthroughs and research being the focus was not relevant for the entire base of monthly from what we could tell. Another amazing insight was that people were giving monthly so that they could give more to the organization, not because it was affordable or convenient, but in fact that giving in increments allowed them to make a larger gift than they could in a lump sum. So that was great to understand. And lastly, we uncovered a large number of people who were giving in memory and who would be compelled by the option to have their monthly donations dedicated to a loved one. And this really sprung out to us because we had previously uncovered in another survey that about a third of all heart and stroke donors were feeling their motivation or the reason they'd given in the first place was in memory. So that was something that we thought had real potential in the monthly audience. So after a lot of internal conversation and looking at these insights, the Breakthrough Fund is now being phased out. And if you go on Heart and Stroke's current monthly page, you'll see that there's actually a much broader and based on all the insights we have, a much more relevant offer for monthly. But on the in memory piece, this is something I know, Jason, you have feelings about in memory and the idea of creating a new offer around that didn't necessarily jive with your understanding and your needs for the program. So maybe you can speak about that a little bit and then dig into what we've been doing to meet that.
Yeah, I think the in memory, in honor, tribute giving is a tough nut to crack, and I really haven't found kind of that magic mix of how to get them out of that stream and into either mid-level or monthly. So in this specific case, we knew that monthly donor, some of the motivation was, in this in memory idea. And the broader situation is it's tougher to convert to monthly. So we have, lists, telemarketing, face-to-face, all of those tactics are harder, in the past few years. It's more difficult. But we do know, so the situation is we have this large number of tribute donors, and typically they don't go on to make a second gift. So is there a way to, from that giant group of people, filter out those that have a strong connection to the organization and then convert them via telemarketing? So that is kind of the setup for where we started this little journey that we're in the middle of literally right now. And we know that if those that are giving in memory, it's higher, it's more female, it tends to skew a bit older, they're more interested in advocacy, like kind of all of the things that are very different from what we thought monthly donors were into. And we know that they think it is more affordable. So what we did is we developed this looks maybe a little complicated, but it's a pretty straightforward tribute conversion strategy with a survey. So we started with an email, and if they convert through the email, that where we emphasize kind of their monthly, the tribute aspect of their giving, then great. And the next step was a survey. And the survey, which I think maybe we'll skip to because we're running short on time, was a 3-question survey. And we really wanted to determine how close they were to the deceased, because that is a factor in their relationship with heart and stroke. And, is there a personal connection? We find that if the deceased person was a friend or an acquaintance, someone that you weren't very close to, and you don't have a connection to heart and stroke, that's not somebody that's going to make another gift. And then what is the most important thing kind of about heart and stroke that, that is going to drive you? So from the survey, those that have completed the survey, you've already self-selected as being interested in heart and stroke. And that is somebody that we're going to contact for telemarketing. If they do make a gift through this kind of more tribute focused initiative, we want to emphasize that their gift was made in honor of their loved one and really set them up for relevant content. Instead of throwing them into like the broad monthly journey, we want to acknowledge that this gift was made in honor of a special friend or loved one, and give them that, just letting them know that their gift was in the right place and their intention was there. So the results, this is ongoing. This launched about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So the survey is currently in market. The responses aren't as high as we hoped, but those that are responding, have self-selected as being interested in further continuing their relationship with heart and stroke.
That's right. And Jason's right. You know, it's a big volume of people, and you know, it's the engagement isn't what it is with other donor groups. Definitely, you know, the tribute and the, you know, kind of repetition of that gift continues to be a challenge, but we are super hopeful that the next stages are going to result in high conversion rates. So as we move on to the TM calls, we're really excited and hopefully can keep some of you posted on how all that goes. So that is everything that we wanted to share. We really appreciate everybody's time and kind of sharing this story of really how relevance can impact donor experience and can impact performance in your program. We're here. I know we've gone a little over time. We're here. Rachel's here in case any questions you want to share or in the chat. But yeah, we really appreciate the opportunity to share.
Maeve, Jason, really brilliant. Some really interesting insights there. Some really great. I love how open you are about what works, what doesn't work, and your different approaches to things. I really like that. And talking about some of the needs and motivations, really great things. So I think because we are quite tight on time, if people have questions, pop them in the Q&A in the chat or email any of us afterwards, and we'll get back to you with your answers. But I think otherwise we're going to just move on now for Roger's next episode, his next sprinkling of loyalty magic dust.
Yeah, thank you guys for that presentation again. A huge amount in there, wasn't there? I'm going to pick up on you talked about affinity quite a bit within that. I'm going to pick up on that links into some of what we're thinking about in terms of commitment. And when I talked about commitment earlier on, I finished by saying when someone believes that your goal is really important to them, then they will be more committed. And of course, that prompts the question of how do we know whether something's important to our supporters? So I'm going to just talk about that for a couple of minutes. To grow commitment, we really need to understand why supporters give. And then when we can match why our supporters give, if you like, their why, with why you exist, your why, that's when we'll really create, I believe, really high levels of commitment. It's the most important factor of the three: commitment, satisfaction, trust. We talked about that. But what creates commitment, and that's true across all organizations across the sector, what creates commitment is entirely unique. Each organization needs high levels of commitments within its supporters, but each organization needs to take a different approach to growing that commitment. And to do that, we need to understand why someone feels strongly about the cause. As we were just talking about that, why might they have an affinity with your cause and with your charity? And that's down to a unique mixture of factors. An obvious one, perhaps, is personal experience. Some people, and particularly if you're a health charity, like we've just been hearing from Health and Stroke in Canada, some of your supporters will have a personal experience of your work or of the issue you deal with. And that can be a really important factor in terms of growing commitment to what you're trying to achieve. Now, what I want to make, I can't go into the detail of this, but I think it's important to point out, personal experience on its own is not enough. It's not enough. Just because they have personal experience doesn't mean they care. You will need to work at that. You need to understand their connection to the cause, and then what it is about that will make them feel and care about what you do. That part of what drives people's commitment for some people is our identity, and it ties in with who they are and who they feel they are. We all have identities, and they change at different times. Sometimes my key identity is a parent, and maybe in that moment I'm going to empathise more with children's causes. Other times I'm a youth leader, so again maybe children's causes, but also societal issues and the issues that affect people. I'm a member of the Green Party, so caring about the environment is part of my identity. I live near Reading. Maybe the sort of local issues are. Part of my identity, who I am, is very much part of then the causes that are important to me, and therefore the causes I will feel committed to. Ethics and attitudes. What do people believe to be right and wrong in the world? How much are they driven by their own perceptions of good and bad? And how much can you tie in with that with your work and the change that you're making? And that links people's values and their psychological values. and donors to some causes and tend to have very different. So if you think about the values that drive someone to care about environmental issues or international issues, human rights issues, and the global approach that people like that have to the world, they're very different values to people that will support, I don't know, local causes or ex-servicemen and women's causes or children's causes. There's a different value set that sits behind some of this. And for some charities, we were listening to Compassion UK a little while ago. People's faith and beliefs are very important for growing that commitment to the charity they support. So really, in terms of growing that commitment, if you like, we're sort of thinking about this as a part 2 of the commitment. Well, I started a little while ago. At the core of that is really important to understand for your supporters what their motivations are, and of course, then you can't average that out. On average, our supporters care about this issue. They're different for different people. We've talked and we've heard people talk about different segments and segmentation today, and really being able to understand how that works for different segments of audiences is when you can really tap into it, reflect that back, show that you're doing something that is important to them, and that's where you'll grow supporter commitment.
Brilliant, thank you, Roger. Always great to hear. Whenever I hear about commitment, satisfaction, and trust, I think, yeah, that's what we do. But I always learn something new, and it always sparks different and unique thoughts for me. It's probably the context of the whole day. But thank you, brilliant stuff. Now I am delighted to hand over to Barbara Levkov and Laura Sanchez, who are from SOS Children's Villages. I believe, Barbara, you're based in Argentina, and Laura in Colombia. So again, we've hopped from one continent to another. I'm delighted to welcome you both. And yes, if you'd like to press on when you're ready. Thank you so much.
Okay. Indeed. Hello, everybody. My name is Barbara. I'm from Argentina. With Laura, we are part from SOS Children's Village from Latin America. I'm individual giving advisor for Latin America and part of the team of fund development from Latin America region. And Laura is from Colombia, from individual giving in the case of Colombia. I will talk about some tools and solution and methodology that we use in case of loyalty for the retention. We try to match the solutions and different tools to analyze the information about the donor behavior. And in this case, we use all this methodology and the behavior and the feedback that we have according to the interest and the expectations of the donor to drive different communications and information and sensibilize the donors. In the case of Latin America, we have 305,000 million donors, individual donors. The main channel of the acquisition is telemarketing, digital, and face-to-face. So we have a big volume of data of individual donors. So we have different tools that are part of the corporation methodology solution that are according to different research that are standardized in the corporate side. So my background is corporate side. I'm part of SOS. I have been here for 8 years. So we have tried to include different methodology to understand, to analyze this huge volume of information. So we will talk about different solutions and how we drive, how we do the match of this analysis that we have to drive different actions to the specific target. So we use segmentation tools that are according to RFM. I will explain very briefly later. Then we have we use the Net Promoter Score, the NPS, to have the feedback of our donor, and we use this indicator, also to have feedback about different aspects of communication, of motivations, of interest, and all that. We have a methodology to define the lifetime value. The lifetime value to describe how we can match this information to be more effective in the investment we have and in the investment that we have in loyalty. So we use this indicator to match to these two cores. We have a methodology to describe the donor journey, to have the emotions and the feelings in different moments of the contact with the donors to solve these negative moments that we can describe with this donor journey. Also, we have a solution, a methodology to describe what is the donor persona, and we have standardized KPIs for all the region. In Latin America, we have different KPIs for acquisition and for retention that are standardized in the region. We have in the region, we have 20 countries, that 17 of these countries have individual giving strategy, and all these region, all these 70 countries use the same CRM that is safer and the same KPIs to analyze the information and to see the evolution and the improvements that they need. So FEM segmentation, we do this methodology annually. The segmentation is according to have a ranking and score of the comparison of the donor behavior according to the donations. This segmentation is according to 3 indicators, that is the recency, the time, how recently the donor made a donation. So we do this score annually, and we analyze the performance year per year. Also in this methodology, we use the indicator of the frequency of the times that the donor has collaborated for the organization, and the monitoring. How much is the collaboration in terms of average? We use this segmentation to analyze how much is the potential of each donor and to build different teams according to the behavior and to the potential that they have. We use this methodology to have a trend of the behavior of all our database according to the individual donors. This is, we use a macro, and we have all a methodology to process this information, but this standardized is inside our CRM, so it's processed, is a standard, is annually. According to the different ranking score that we have with this segmentation, we can describe different clusters depending on the life cycle. We have different categories, and with that categories, we can analyze how much is the potential for each group. We have a group that is critical, that the financial benefit is a high level, but the commitment is low. So according to the different target group that we can include our database into this cluster, we can integrate different segmentation, and we can drive different action according to the potential. Another group is our ideal donors that they have a commitment that is high, and a financial benefit that is high. So according to that, we can arrive with this donor to different actions. They are regular donor with high average donation, several donation, and they are very loyal with our brand. So another group that we have, they are the lasting donors, that the commitment is high, but the financial benefit is not high. So we can induce different action to drive this financial benefit according to the differential to increase and all that. So we do this methodology annually, and we can see the trends that drive with this methodology. We have the evolution of this methodology annually to see how the actions have result in terms of behavior of the donor, if they have been effective or not, according to the evolution of the segments. In this segmentation, the database is segmented in 120 segmentation, but we can integrate different donor because the behavior can be similar. So another methodology that we use to analyze and to match the donor, the behavior, and the interest of and the expectation with the brand is the Net Promoter Score. That the Net Promoter Score is an indicator for a survey, an indicator that can drive the satisfaction of our database. We improve. We use this moment that we have the donor feedback to ask about different aspects, and not only to have a performance and a KPI for this metric. Also, as I mentioned before, we have a mapping that is described according to different stages to build the donor journey. And it's not an illustration of the donor journey. We try to connect with the emotions and the goals that they have this audience in each moment of content, to see which are the moments, the content, the interaction that are more negative, to solve different in stage, in some phases, different action to convert to become a donor satisfaction, and to match the interest and expectation with the different interaction we have since the acquisition is done. So this is the different stages that we have. We have in this donor journey, we can describe the goals, the feeling, the emotions, the line of the time. I'm sorry, some slides are in Spanish, but I can translate the idea, the general idea. We have the timeline, the actions, the contents, and the behavior according to the donation. With all this stage, we can drive how much is the feeling, and how much the feelings is go with the goal and the interaction that we have in each moment. So to build this donor journey, we have 3 stages. That is mapping. The first stage is mapping the donor, the current donor journey. The second is evaluate and prioritize. So we can describe in general what are the moments that have been negative according to the goals and feelings that the donor, and the results according to the interaction that the donor had in this in each contact in interaction. So we evaluate and prioritize what are the moments that are negative, and in the next stage, we test new experiences. So also we have a lifetime value indicator that it has been built in SOS to measure and to be more specific in the investment we have in the acquisition level and in the loyalty level. So we try to have an indicator that integrate the retention, the attrition, the time of the donor, that we can performance according to the behavior of all our database. So with different variables that are part of this lifetime value, as rotation rate, donation frequency, donation average, measuring time, stay time, margin, and discount rate, we have built a formula that we have a fair formula that is according to the monetary, the value of the donor will have in the time, or in the average time that the donation collaborates with SOS. We have a margin lifetime value that add to the simple lifetime value the margin, and we have another formula that add the retention information. So according to the different exercises that we have done, we use a lifetime value that is the average of these three. So this is for my part. Let's listen Laura and her experience in Colombia.
Hi everyone. In South Colombia, you can put the next one, Barbara, please. In South Colombia, we understand the information in three big groups. The first one is about transactional information and tell us everything about frequency, money, and value. The second one is strategic information that gives us a clue how people react to our campaign. And the last one is about behavior. With this one, we can know more about motivation and likes. Next one. Okay, in the transactional information, we have things like lifetime value, donor profile, average fee, and others. In the strategic information, we include open rate, predicted data model, and net promoter score. And in the behavior part, we made an archetype research that told us how the donors feel about us, what they do in their free time, how they prefer to be contacted, which one is their principal motivation, and how we should talk to them. In the archetype model, donors can be in one of the 12 different kinds of them. If they move for empathy, that is the first example that we have here, you have to tell them a good story about the people that they are helping, or show them an emotional video. If they move by numbers, that is the next slide, you have to be very, very clear. Sí, el otro. You have to be very clear about the impact of the donation that they are doing. How is the impact in the life of the other? If they move if they want to be a star and their motivation is to recognition, you have to put it on Facebook. And if they move for a specific benefit for themselves, you have to find new donors. So here it's very important to find the way and to find that specific thing that is going to motivate or that is motivating your donors to be in the organization and to give you a donation. So it's very important that you ask yourself, what are the priorities for your donor base?
I think we are at time. I don't know if there are any questions.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Laura, from across the Atlantic from us. It's our, another location we've been hopping around the globe. I wanted to ask, so Laura, you talked about supporters who were moved by empathy and those who are moved more, so like kind of an emotional and rational. What is the mix across your supporters? Is it kind of, what are their different characteristics?
Okay, actually in our donor base, we found 6 different types of archetypes. And the first 3 that have we have more donors that are in that way is one that moves for empathy. So that give us like a very good way to move our communication, because we know we have to tell like a story about the children and we have to be like very emotional. And the other one is the numeric one. So we have to put numbers in our emails, we have to put numbers in our social media, because one part of our actual, our currently donors move by numbers. So that 2 are the biggest one in our database.
Cool. So I love hearing that. So there are lots of different ways you can group or segment supporters. And yeah, we've talked about data and behavior and lifetime value and RFV, RFM. And quite often we hear about, or we work with segments that look like age or gender or region or life state. So ones that are very kind of crude, very kind of blunt. But I love what you're doing, thinking about what drives people and actually communicating with them on that basis. I think I'd love to find out more and invite you back to talk more about how you kind of really tap into those different archetypes and those different emotions, how you understand who it is you're talking to and complete that conversation. Really fascinating stuff. So it's filled my head with I want to know lots and lots more, but we don't, unfortunately, we don't have the time today. But definitely, let's carry on this conversation, and we can maybe come back another day and share some of the, like, how you've managed to do that, because I think there's lots of people here who'd be interested in understanding how do you get that communication to that person with that motivation. Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you so much, Barbara. Really pleased that you were able to join us today. Thank you so much. Lots of praise and love in the chat for you. So I'm going to hand over now very briefly to Roger for his latest sprinkling of magic loyalty dust.
And I'm going to add my thanks to that. And it just we strive, don't we, we think, oh, we've got to create a fantastic sport experience for everyone, but we lose sight of the fact that within that there's different segments and people have different needs and different motivations. So yeah, really good to hear that. And that leads on to some extent about different expectations as well. And I'm going to talk now about supporter satisfaction, because satisfaction is all about understanding what your supporters' expectations are and then doing something, going beyond them, delivering beyond them. So let's start off by looking at satisfaction. Now we measure, as you know, we talked about commitment, satisfaction, and trust today. We measure that, and what we see is that actually the average satisfaction score tends to be a little bit lower than the average commitment score and the average trust score. It's the lower of the 3 scores that we see across the charities that we're researching with. And that's a problem. Adrian Sargent always used to talk about the fact that satisfied donors lapse. It's not until you become a really satisfied donor that actually that lapsing stops. So that's a problem we've got to address and change. So we need to understand that satisfaction is a whole package of the way you communicate with people. It's about the way you thank people. It's about the way you ask people for money. It's about whether they understand, whether it's appropriate in style and tone. It's about whether they believe that you understand why they support, and then you're recognizing them as an individual. As I say, satisfaction is about when you exceed people's expectations, and when you exceed their expectations, then that's when they will feel great, and maybe you'll surprise them and go beyond that. When you just match their expectations, they'll think, oh yeah, that's right, that's nice. It's when we actually exceed them and do something different, special, better than they're expecting from us. And just one example of that, because there's so many opportunities when we talk to people and communicate with people, how we thank people. We can do a thank you letter. Thank you very much, donor, for your donation of £25. It's so good to know you care, and we can do that, and that's what lots of people do. Or we can go that extra mile and put something a little bit special in the post that makes the supporter feel just a little bit better than they might have been thinking about all day. So satisfaction is about taking what you do, is about recognizing the moments in the supporter experience that you can elevate up and just give someone a little bit more than they're expecting. It's that opportunity just through that to put a little bit of magic into their life and create that magic moment that makes them feel really, really special and makes them love being a donor of yours.
Magic, Roger.
See what you did there.
Yeah, it was that, wasn't it? So no, brilliant, thank you, and yeah, awesome. So now I'm delighted to welcome Jo Dunsford, who is speaking from Animals Asia. Jo's actually based in the UK, so we've gone full circle from the UK back to the UK. But Jo's going to be talking to us about Animals Asia, the supporter experience, and, if I'm not going to steal your thunder, a little bit about family.
Yeah, hi, thanks ever so much, Richard and Roger, and hello everybody. I remember them. So hi everybody, so I'm really pleased to be with you this afternoon. So I'm Jo Dunsford from Animals Asia, and I'm going to be talking to you. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, I'm just gonna have to share my notes. Present view. Yeah, I'm really pleased to be with you this afternoon. I'm going to be talking to you about donor loyalty through a global fundraising lens. I'm going to be addressing two key questions today. So, is there a difference in donor response and behaviour across markets? And what is Animals Asia doing to enjoy such high loyalty from its supporters? We've got a lot to get through today, so I'm going to be moving at some pace. So if anybody wants any more information at the end, please do feel free to reach out to me. I'm so sorry I'm having to share the notes, but otherwise I'll be a bit blindsided. So firstly, I just wanted to give you a quick introduction to Animals Asia. We were founded in 1998 by Jill Robinson, who is still our CEO today, with a key mission to end bear bile farming. We also have programs in cat and dog welfare and improving the lives of animals in captivity. We work predominantly across China and Vietnam, although our reach and impact extends right across Asia. Our donors refer to us, I'm quite proud of this, as the charity that gets things done, which is a nod to the crucial element of trust, which builds loyalty. In under 25 years, we have already played a pivotal role in making the sale of cat and dog meat illegal in China. We're pioneering an ethical elephant tourism model in Vietnam, which we hope will bring an end to elephant riding in the country. We've rescued over 670 bears, and we have 2 sanctuaries in China and Vietnam. We also have an MOU with the Vietnamese government to end bear bile farming in the country in the next few years, and we're currently building our 3rd sanctuary to bring home the country's remaining 300 bile bears. That's quite a lot in under 25 years, I think, so I'm quite proud that we have all those achievements. We operate an individual giving programme through a central in-house team, and each market receives the same experience. So we work across Australia, Europe, the UK, the USA and Hong Kong. This slide shows how different responses vary across markets to different cases for support. We have here, we've taken data from a thank you mailing and 2 of our quarterly appeals, one of which is focused on a bear's road to recovery and another which is a CapEx project for the new sanctuary. This is interesting for us because it shows the first two appeals are quite typical, where we see little variation in response rates across markets. We know that if an appeal does well, it does well everywhere and vice versa. The UK is often the best performer, and Hong Kong or Asia, which does include donors from across outside of Hong Kong and Asia more broadly, is always significantly under. There's always been an assumption or belief internally too that US donors prefer a more tangible case for support over unrestricted. But actually this slide shows in fact that the US may respond better to case study stories, and CapEx projects seem to create transformational effects on our Hong Kong donors, where we see here that more than doubles the response rate. So that's something we need to go away and test. And it was quite interesting listening to the prior presentation where they were talking about what kinds of motivations trigger donors. And obviously we're talking on a macro level here across markets, but this is quite an interesting sort of bone of contention internally, because lots of people internally wonder whether we should do different appeals and different campaigns for different markets. But actually, we see that things rise and fall in the same way. So this has been really rather an interesting exercise. Where we do see much more variation, though, is in response via email. Again, the case study is more popular than the thank you, and it would seem we would do well to consider how and where we market our CapEx appeals, because we do see much greater variation there than in other cases for support. We don't send rescue or emergency appeals via MAL, but I've added them here. And again, you can see how the market trends stay the same. So the Europe first, followed by the UK, Asia, and Australia and the US. Hong Kong is always the outlier. And again, case studies are the way to appeal to the US audiences. I'm going to do a quick skip over our average gifts. The main takeout is that the market performance is broadly comparable again, although we do see the average gift in the UK for thank yous is quite low. And we know that what Hong Kong lacks for in response rate, it makes up for in average gifts. And that's consistent across all of our appeals. Finally, again, this slide shows the rise and fall in global appeals comes from the case for support rather than the market specifically. We know that the bear story is consistently lower than other appeals. What we do know about our donors then is that while some markets may respond better to certain content, broadly speaking, they're consistent in their behaviour and their responses. This demonstrates not only is it possible to run a global fundraising programme, but it's also highly effective. We understand, of course, that this audience is self-selecting and that they've all come in on the same acquisition content, but we know that donors are donors regardless of where they live. So what was interesting to us was how would that play out in terms of loyalty when we took part in the Chase Index. So Animals Asia's donors were the first outside of the UK to engage in the Chase Index. So we were all fascinated to see if there would be differences across the markets. This graph shows the top line scores for the three key metrics of trust, commitment and satisfaction, which are used to build loyalty scores. But as you can see here, we're seeing similar results, again, with Hong Kong donors slightly under the other markets. The variation we see here is minimal, though, with just a point or two difference between 6.1 and 6.4, excluding Hong Kong. And when we take into account that very few charities in the index score over 6 on any of the metrics, these results become somewhat remarkable, because Animals Asia is the only charity to score over 6.1 on all of the metrics, and we're doing that in all of the markets. So there's really something quite special going on here. We thought that perhaps our scores might be impacted because we had limited acquisition activity in the year or two preceding the survey, and so by default our donor base was long-standing. But when we checked our scores against recency segments, we saw that whilst there was a slight dip in the scores for the 0 to 6 month segment, actually it didn't take us very long to bring that up. So the commitment was still scoring 6.1, and it was only taking us 6 months to lift satisfaction and trust over the line too. So this data is taken from over 50 countries with similar types of high scores. So we know that there's something special that we are doing here at Animals Asia that's really creating this kind of impact. I'm going to skip over these slides because I'm just worried about time. Basically, I know what you're thinking. Well, hang on such a second. Yeah, so I was just want to think about what makes us all special. And I know what you're all thinking, that we have bears. And that, I've been in fundraising, or they've got bears, they've got children, and that there is something certainly in that. And certainly when we ask our donors what makes us special, the fact that we rescue abused animals does feature highly in their opinion of what makes us special. But we also know that there are other charities in Chase Index who rescue abused animals, so that can't be the sole reason. There must be something specific that we are doing here at Animals Asia, which is nurturing that loyalty. And so the answer is in this slide, but it's in the we rather than in the bears. And here's how I asked a donor what they thought about why we have such high loyalty, and this is what they said. We did some research and we found that the supporter loyalty scores for Animals Asia were higher than other charities in the sector were enjoying, and we wanted to understand why. You had a sort of view on that.
Yeah, so, that's because it's family. It's because it's a family. You bring, it's you're not just a charity that we support.
So the answer then is in the we, it's in how we approach our work. But how does that manifest itself, and what is it specifically that we are doing to make that happen? Well, pretty soon after I arrived at Animals Asia back in 2015, I got the sense that things were a little bit different here. I started receiving invitations from supporters to be on my personal Facebook, and I politely declined them as I thought it was a little bit unusual and a bit unprofessional for me to accept. I also thought it was a bit strange that we signed off on emails both to colleagues and to supporters with bear hugs, which I found a bit uncomfortable when I first arrived here and thought it was a bit weird. And rather than being welcome to the team, I was welcome to the family. And I thought, yeah, they certainly do things a bit differently here. And indeed we do. We call it the Animals Asia way. I believe it's this approach to our culture which embraces staff and supporter in exactly the same way that makes us special. It's hard to define these differences because it's a culture, it's inherent in everything we do and the way we do it. And I've tried to put together some headings which you can all consider in relation to your respective organisations. The first is that we're very clear about our mission, and we understand that that mission is fundamentally important to the lives of our donors. And actually Heather, who you just saw on the clip, I went to her wedding and I listened to her give her vows, herself and her wife, and they included Animals Asia in their wedding vows. And I actually asked Heather when I was interviewing her why she did that, because I thought it was a particularly special moment. And she said that she wanted her wedding vows, herself and Carol, to celebrate all of the parts of them that make them them. And the work that they do with Animals Asia and the cause and the mission that they're committed to with Animals Asia is a central part of who they are. And I thought that was really powerful. That speaks to how our donors are driven by the mission in exactly the same we are, and the charity itself is. And I think that is, that's a real key differentiator. And understanding that, and the fact that we understand that, I think is central to our success. So also, because what we do is driven by a common cause, we come together as one family with no lines between staff, supporter, fundraiser. We're all committed to the mission and we're all fundraisers. So this approach builds relationships between supporters and all staff, which is led by our founder, Jill Robinson, in which we are encouraged to break down those walls of formality and speak from the heart to one another about that shared mission. And all of this plays out in our content, both in what we share and how we share it. This means that our supporters absolutely feel they're with us every step of the way. We talk about working together and the shared journey. It's the ultimate donor journey.
I really just wanted to acknowledge and thank everyone at Animals Asia for their incredible and tireless work to end bear bow farming in Vietnam. This next phase that we're moving into together is crucial and exciting. This second sanctuary is going to provide a safe and lush home for every bear. And I feel honored to be a part of this journey with all of you.
And here's a clip as well from one of our supporters.
Do you know what? I think it makes you feel very proud. And I think that's the thing when you see the rescues, you think, oh, I've been part of that. We've been part of that journey. And I think that's one thing that, it does. It makes you feel proud. And I think Animals Asia does make you feel, well, I don't think, they do make you feel part of it.
I have to say I felt particularly proud listening to those clips and speaking to our donors when I was doing this presentation. So thank you to everybody that took part. So we absolutely consider our donors to be part of the team, and we understand that this is every bit their mission as much as ours, and every bit their success as much as ours. And I also spoke in the preparation for this presentation to some members of staff about what donors and fundraising, means to them. And again, I was very, very proud by what came back. So I spoke to the director of our China Bear Rescue Centre, Ryan, who said the only reason why we can do what we do is as a result of our donors trusting us, and that there is a huge respect for our donor base throughout not just my team, but the organisation as a whole. Heidi Quinn, who heads up our Vietnam Bear Rescue Centre, said the donors are the lifeblood of our work, literally. We are the stewards. I love this quote. We are stewards of not their money, but their faith. We really are the eyes and hands of our donors, entrusted to do the work perhaps they wish they themselves could do. I did not pay these people to say these things. When asked how they feel about fundraising, Ryan said he'll never forget one of his first strategic planning meetings where it was drilled into his head that everyone is a fundraiser. And he said it was true for the whole organisation, that everybody has a part to play. And Heidi went on to say that fundraising is inextricably linked to the organisation. She's proud to show the supporters what their support achieves, and it's an intrinsic part of her work. And so I think that culture that runs all the way throughout the organisation is critical, and the donors feel that. We have a very authentic affection for and affiliation with our supporters, which is felt all the way through the organisation. And that means that we all can speak from the heart, and suddenly signing off with bear hugs feels perfectly normal and natural, and even quite fun. And so because we hold our donors in this regard, we can share how they keep us going with morale as well as funding, just like you would with team members. We achieve together here at Animals Asia, or not at all. And I've got a bit of a long clip for you, but I think it's really powerful and really does bring together all of the things that I've been talking about.
This is it. This is the moment that we've finally been waiting for 8 long years. We've been able to bring our moon bears home from the ex-bear barn farm in Nanning to our bear rescue centre in Chengdu. We've rescued hundreds of bears over the years, but no one has ever attempted anything like this before, bringing so many bears home to sanctuary in a single operation. It's a massive achievement, and I'm just so proud of our team, and of course of our very brave bears too. Even before this hugely challenging final leg that has seen 26 trucks bringing 101 bears home on a 750-mile journey. It's been a long, hard road. We couldn't have done it without our amazing bear and vet team in China, without the help of the local authorities, and without the help of the local community too. But most importantly, we could never have done this without you, our supporters, our donors, our family. Even through these ups and downs, through all the uncertainty, you have never wavered. Your constancy has kept us going, and now together we can finally give these bears the life they've always deserved, the life you've always wanted for them.
Just going to move. I'm just mindful of time, but I think that really does start to bring together the points that I'm making. And that means that there is no inside here at Animals Asia. We are open and transparent about every step of the journey. We get to share the highs and the lows, and we have fun, like this particular favourite clip of mine, which we shared during the Olympics.
And here we are back at the pool for the next round of water wrestling. Lotus moving in from Fritz. Standard greeting and classic opening. Lovely move, lovely move. Oh, the umpire Suki sees technical faults. Lotus.
I'm just moving on because I'm just mindful of time, but I think it brings some of the fun of Animals Asia to you. And here's a clip which does have something. This is quite a distressing clip, but I wanted to share it with you. Bear with me, I'm just mindful of time.
Rockabye, now close your eyes, and sleep shall come. In this crazy world, sometimes when hope is gone, we'll dream as dreamers, follow all the stepping stones. I'll hold your hand, we'll walk towards the sun. I'll hold your hand, we'll climb them one by one.
We did the postmortem on the same afternoon, and the one and only finding that we found from her postmortem was brain hemorrhage. She had some bleeding in her brain, and the brain was inflamed. We believe that this is the cause of her condition in the morning and her stop bleeding during her recovery, which is untreatable and irreversible.
We're able to share content like that because we have a mutual trust and respect with our donor base. And that is the very foundation which ultimately creates the loyalty which Animals Asia enjoys. I'm sorry if that upset anybody, it was a difficult clip. We treat our donors like family because that's exactly what they are. And so I just wanted to share that. It was a particularly intimate moment that I don't think all organisations can do or would do. And I think it was really where we set ourselves apart from other organisations. So I really wanted to try and think about what practical steps you can all take to nurture similar cultures in your own organisations. And I thought I'd just leave you with a few thoughts. There we go. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry I had to do that with the slides on. There we go.
That was brilliant, Jo. It made no difference to me. I got the content, got the messages, got the impact. It was really good stuff. Thank you. So really good mix of things in there.
Great. I overrun a bit, but happy to take questions.
I think, well, I don't know that there's any questions, but there's a lot of love, a lot of thanks, and lots of appreciation throughout the. Actually, there was one question: what's his capital expenditure? But no, I think there's just like a lot of love for the presentation and for everything that Animals Asia is doing. You're right, we did overrun a little bit, which is absolutely no problem, and we always allow for a little bit of extra time. And I think if anyone has any questions, yeah, lots of wows and amazings in the chat there. So if anybody has any questions for Jo, do pass them on to us, or I'm sure they can contact you directly, can they, Jo? Or
yeah, very happy for that. Yeah.
And we'll happily answer questions offline outside our Loyalty Day celebration. So I think we're going to have just a couple of little bits. I'm really enthusiastic about all of the 5 presentations we've had, and I'm desperate to kind of draw together all my key things that I find are really exciting about them. But before we go there, we are going to hand over again for a little bit of sprinkling of that Roger Lawson magic loyalty dust.
Yeah, thank you, Jo. And wow, I suspect everyone watching this is slightly choked having seen some of that as well. But I've had the privilege of knowing Jo and some of the Animals Asia team for a number of years now, and everything you've just seen is so authentic with what they do. And I think what comes across is that loyalty for them and keeping donors, and that sense of family that Jo talked about, is not just about the way they put together their appeals and their thank yous and their communications. It absolutely runs right the way through the whole organisation. And that this is the last of the little 3-minute insights I just want to share with you, because Richard and I have worked with a number of charities now that are seeking to grow loyalty, and we've spent a bit of time looking at those charities that have been particularly successful and trying to understand what it is that makes them successful. And the good news is that the answer is simple, although, as Alan Clayton would say, simple isn't easy. We see 6, if you like, core competencies that the charities that are successful in growing their supporter loyalty share across their organisations. And the first one is strategy. Strategy. What do I mean by this? And Jo just talked about that they're driven by mission. They're not driven by a spreadsheet and numbers and things like that. They're absolutely driven by the mission. Everyone at Animals Asia is driven by the same mission, and all their supporters are driven by the same mission. And part of that mission and part of that vision is how their supporters should feel. And Jill's talking there about the role that supporters play. They have, and the charities that we work with that are successful have a very clear vision for how their charities should feel, not what they should do, how they should feel, and what it means to be a supporter. And they have a very clear strategy for how they're going to achieve that through their supporter promise or other actions. So clear supporter strategy, supporter-led strategy is important. They also have a real genuine understanding of their supporters. Yes, of course they do analysis of behaviours and retention and things like that, but they also really strive to understand their supporters' motivations and their needs. And it's all segmented. We've heard a lot today about talking about different segments and talking to different people in different ways. And it's because that's absolutely within the organisations, trying to really understand those different segments and do what's right for each one. They have measures that are not just about the amount of money that's coming in through the door. They have measures that measure how their supporters feel, whether that's satisfaction or, in our case, loyalty and things like that. And they celebrate those measures. They celebrate when they get evidence that their supporters feel really good about supporting them. And sometimes that's a formal, structured way of measuring something. And sometimes it's anecdotal and feedback from a supporter. But they really strive to want to understand how their supporters feel. They have processes in place that enable this and make it possible to build these fantastic experiences. They have databases that hold the right information. They're user friendly, and not only have they got the right information, they can get that information out and then get it out fast so they can respond and communicate quickly and topically. And they have consistent processes across all touch points and fundraising, events, services, campaigns, volunteering, etc., and a really consistent approach to using those and offering the experience in those touch points. They have leadership that if you like, leads from the front, that people that walk the walk. We saw Jill, who's the founder and chief exec of Animals Asia, talking about the fact that nothing could be possible without their supporters. They really champion how the organisation should communicate and how to engage and inspire and value supporters. And then that translates through into the decision making. Decision making is based on supporters. Budgets are allocated according to that. And so leadership is vitally important. leadership doesn't have to just be the top person in an organization. Leadership can come from different places. Yeah, but they do have people who lead in that. And then finally, but not least at all, it's the employees, the people. People feel empowered. People in these organizations feel empowered, that they're trained, they know their role, they have the space, the resource. Most importantly, they feel the passion for the supporters, and they feel able to make a difference. So these 6 competencies that the organizations that really successfully grow loyalty share absolutely sit at the heart of who these organizations are. I think it can be a little bit scary, can't it, looking at that, thinking so much of that's outside my control. And I think one thing to take from this is that it is about a whole organization coming together. But organizations could change because of the people in there. You can't do it all yourself, but you can start the process to get the organization to do that. So that's the last of my 3-minute insights I want to share. And Richard and I are going to talk a little bit now about kind of some of the things that we've seen this afternoon. But one of the things I knew was going to come up and be talked about, and everyone has talked about a lot today, is this concept of measurement. And I put it right at the front when I was talking about, those of you who were with us at the start, where I was talking about changing the conversation away from just measuring income and number of donors to actually thinking about the relationship and the way people feel about supporters. We've heard it in, I think, all the presentations we've done today about people measuring not just the response rates and the income, but actually measuring how their supporters feel through the day. And what we've seen with all those organizations we've heard from is that the measures of that satisfaction, loyalty, trust, whatever it is that's important, those measures are celebrated in the same way that the transaction or the income measures are. And you've just seen it's the M of simple that I just talked about as well. The measures are so important. For me, measurement sits absolutely core. If you want to create change in your organization, you have to have a measure for the thing you want to change. For me, it's so important. I wrote, under Richard's guidance, I wrote a project for the Commission on the Donor Experience a few years ago, those of you who remember that. And the heading I put right up front, the front page, was this: that the moment you start to measure something, you change it. And it changes you. And I absolutely believe that. An organization's KPI tell you everything about what's important for them. If your KPIs are income and number of donors, you're going to chase that, and you're going to chase that. If they go up as far as retention rates, you're going to start thinking about, okay, a bit longer term. If they go into lifetime value, that's going to go further. And if they go to satisfaction and loyalty, brilliant. That's what we really want to see. Because when you start having a KPI for that, when that's reported, that's when you'll start to change what you do. But also it will change you. It will change what you think is important. It will change what you prioritize. Now, it's all well and good having a target. I was at a conference before COVID, and some of you will know Robin Peake. He's one of those passionate advocates of ingraining that culture of loving your donors across an organization around. And he was speaking, and he did this thing where he asked everyone to put up their hand if they have a target for how quickly they send a thank you letter out. E.g., we want to get thank you letters out, or 85% of our thank you letters out within 48 hours or something like that. And pretty much everyone in the room put their hand up. He then asked what I thought was a really clever question. Okay, how many of you measure whether you actually do against that? And how many of you report how long it actually takes? And then take action on the back of it. More than half of the hands went down. So they all had a target, but more than half of people actually weren't necessarily measuring it or reporting it or taking action on the back of it. And I'm going to shamelessly plagiarize Robin. And I'd like you to think, how many of you have an aim to have happy donors, satisfied donors, loyal donors, trusting donors, committed donors? Something like that. How many of you have an aim to do that? I'm guessing most of you do, because I don't think you'd be here this afternoon if you didn't. But then I want to and I'm not going to ask this, but how many of you actually measure how happy, satisfied, loyal, committed, trusting your donors are and move on the back of it? Measurement is critical. it not only tells you if you're successful, it can tell you what's successful. You can look at different parts of the program, different segments, and how does your work and how does your communications and how does your stewardship actually work, and which bits of your stewardship work. Does a newsletter have more effect than an event or a thankathon? How important are your thank you letters in that? Measurement is absolutely critical. We all say, oh yes, we're going to invest in stewardship, but we need to know where we can invest, because there's so many different ideas that we can do. We need to know where we can invest, and it's only by measuring and testing in that we can really see what's working for the organisations in there. So I think if you've heard things today that you're excited about, that you want to take back, not only think about what you can do, but think about, can I actually track whether it's working for my donors and my supporters and that. Now, we have a tool at About Loyalty. We call it the Chase Index. A couple of people have referred to it today. And it focuses on measuring supporter commitment, satisfaction and trust, and benchmarking that against other organisations, but also benchmarking it for you and your different segments of supporters over time. It tells you who has high loyalty, who doesn't, what sits behind it. And obviously we'd love to talk more about that if anyone's interested in knowing more about that as well. But it's not about you. It's not necessarily about using big tools and big surveys. It can be quick. I hate the phrase quick and dirty, but it can be quick. It can be anecdotal. And then Jo talked about just some of the things she hears from supporters, and that's when you know that you're really having an impact for people. So my last plea to you today is take away what you've seen today, what you've heard today. Take away the ideas from what that you've heard today, and do it, implement it, make change on the back of it, but also measure it. Create a measure, ask your supporters how they feel, report against that, and then use that to create more change going forwards. And that's how we create a program. That's how it doesn't become just one-off work. That's how we create a program that over time it grows and grows that supporter loyalty, grows the retention, the support from those people, grows their value. And ultimately, that's how we achieve our missions. That's how we save bears, save lives, rescue, and create the change that we want to change in the world.
Brilliant. Thank you, Roger. And as you were talking, I was thinking back to Why Loyalty Day. And of course, it all, I mean, brilliantly, conveniently, was it almost planned, all wrapped up nicely. But I want to just draw on some of the themes that came out for me, some of the really, going back to the start, going back to, yes, Why Loyalty Day, absolutely critical foundations. We heard from Vanessa, Australian Red Cross. The thing for me that stood out was about, well, actually, I liked one of her final slides, the knitting circle. And that goes back to what you're talking about, simple. It's about how do we get the whole organisation behind? And actually, Jo talked about that. It's the family, it's everybody together working to that. So I love that idea of the knitting circle. But she also said, donors value being heard. So it's actually about listening. And again, we've seen that coming through over and over again. So what are the things that people are doing to listen to supporters? Viktoria at Compassion International used the word neighbours. Now we talk about supporters, donors, people, customers. They use the word neighbours. I really like that an organisation has thought about how it's going to how it think about its supporters and use a frame that reflects its own purpose. So it makes it easier for those people, supporters, neighbours, donors, whoever they are, to be part of that team, to be part of the family and the team. It's a great way of it's a little bit of a nudge, isn't it, to help people think about the S in simple. You know, how important are your supporters in terms of your strategy? We then moved on to Jason and Maeve and Rachel from Heart and Stroke Canada. And I think one of the questions they asked was, what inspires your supporters? And it was really about trying to get underneath the skin and understand that inspiration and motivation. That's what really stood out for me. And again, that plays to all of the above in terms of like Why Loyalty Day. And then to Barbara and Laura from SOS Children's Villages. And I loved that they took the idea of motivations and inspiration and motivation and inspiration, and use those in their actual segmentation. Rarely do we see organizations that can actually implement practical, from a data perspective, those how you employ motivations in those direct communications. And as I said to Laura, really keen to find out more about that. maybe we can share some more with you at a future presentation. And finally, of course, Jo at Animals Asia, and the idea of family and everyone being part of the team. And I don't know about you, but I could really feel that sense that there was no difference between staff member, the person working on the front line, supporter. Everybody really felt part of that team. And what a great way to kind of build and really strengthen that loyalty. Absolutely fantastic. So those are just some fantastic themes there. And of course, bringing it all together, love that. Of course, I would, going back to the commission, you know, measuring is really important at the heart of there, you know, and measuring something, you change it and it changes you. So again, thank you to all of our speakers. I've been through everybody again. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to Roger for your sprinklings of magic loyalty dust throughout the afternoon. Absolutely brilliant. And thank you to everybody who's come along this afternoon and put in your time and energies and brains to listen, ask questions and share the love. And we look forward to seeing you, many of you in the coming weeks, but everybody and more, I hope, next year at Loyalty Day 2023. So thank you all so much. Take care and enjoy your weeks and weekends when they arrive.